What's up, everybody? Welcome back to I Came With Fire podcast. Tonight we're here with a very special guest, somebody I had been wanting to talk to for a while, Mr. Chuck Zukowski. Chuck, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself for everybody? Because to me, you're kind of an icon, but I want everybody to know who you are.
Well, I mean, you've been trying for years. I kept saying, no, not now, not now.
You're right. You're right. I know. Finally.
Said, okay, today's the day.
Exactly. Fill you in the backstory later.
So I'm Chuck, and I've been doing this for about 35 years now. I host UFOnut.com. That's my website. People ask me, why UFO Nut? Well, it's because when I first started doing this, people were calling me a nut, basically. And so instead of getting all mad about it, I decided to go ahead and roll with it. So UFO Nut, and it's actually an acronym too now. And I keep forgetting the acronym because I had to make it up. Unconventional flying objects, non-human, unrecognizable technology.
Perfect.
There you go.
Yeah.
I've been at it for a while. Started off being a Roswell investigator. I lived in California and started doing that. And then as I got more and more interested in ufology and more investigations, and especially with my blog, being out there, then I started getting picked up on some TV shows to do, certain investigations. So I've been on Ghost Adventures and Finding Bigfoot, and a few other ones. And then in 2019, I got my own TV show, Alien Highway.
Yeah.
But, but right before that, a book was written about me called The 37th Parallel, and that was based on my theory. That's a whole other story. I could tell you. I could shorten it real quick, but it's pretty.
It's a good book.
Oh, you actually read it?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, most people say they actually read it until I say, "What'd you think about the ending?" They go, "Oh, it was really good," and I know they're lying. Well, they didn't read it.
Right. Well, everything all redacted out and all that, So I saw, I was reading just like people talking about you on some forums online, and a lot of people were like, man, I started reading that Ben Mesrick book about him, and then I got to the end and I was like, what the heck? I can't even finish this thing. All this stuff is redacted, It's like, well, there must be something out there the government doesn't want us to know because, they wouldn't do it otherwise.
Well, the interesting thing is with books, a lot of times there's an ending, but there's no ending to this book because I'm alive. I didn't die. And I'm still doing the same thing I was doing before. For those people who read 37th Parallel and wondering about the ending, Ben Mesrick actually came up with that ending. We were, at the time, I was alluding to Robert Bigelow, the billionaire. Mm-hmm. This was before we found out in 2017 that he was working with the Pentagon, but I knew he was working with the government. I thought it was the CIA, maybe the NSA, but, I knew he was working with the government because I had enough evidence.
Makes sense.
But so I have a few $100, and he has millions, so I'm not going to get him mad at me. I'm not going to piss him off. So we redacted some of that stuff, and then some other stuff he redacted was just craft sightings I had. But I think he did it more to leave people reading at the very end that that's still a mystery.
Right.
That there's no conclusion to this. Even now, with the Pentagon involved, we still don't have a conclusion. It's still a mystery. So I think that's how you wanted to leave it open.
What's interesting about your book is I listen to audiobooks mostly. I usually don't tend to read, so I listen while I'm driving for hours. And when you get to the redacted parts, it's just someone saying redacted over and over and over again. It's actually kind of like weird. It's just redacted.
Yeah, so, I think it was weird because I think Ben Mesrick himself actually did the reading on that.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
And I wish it was somebody. I mean, I was on a radio show out of Australia just after the book came out, and there was a couple of hosts like you, and one read part of the first chapter, and with his accent and his enthusiasm, and I'm going, God, I wish he would have done the audio because this guy, really put it in there,
right?
And especially with the Australian accent, it sounded pretty cool. But
that is cool.
Yeah, it was kind of fun.
Good day.
The whole premise of the book actually was based on a theory I had. I was on Unexplained Files Season 1 on a couple of their episodes doing stuff on cattle mutilations and UFOs. And then, I'm sorry. Yeah, it was Unexplained Files, but it was the Science Channel. And then the second season, they called me. They said, hey, towards the end of your cattle mute segment on the first season, you mentioned this 37 parallel thing. What's all that about? And I said, well, it's a theory I have, and I have data. They go, can you send us the data? So I just inundated them with all this data, just downloaded all this stuff. They called me back in about a week and said, hey, you want your own episode? I'm like, you don't know. Yeah, of course. You know?
Yeah, right.
So it was really cool. So it was called, Paranormal Highway Across America. And the neat thing is they kind of let me do what I wanted to do and how I wanted to do the show. And it worked out pretty well because the show kind of looks like, it is really I'm running investigations, talking to real people, nothing scripted. The first time I start interviewing them is basically, was in the show. Well,
yeah.
Bo Flynn from Flynn Pictures Productions, who does all the Dwayne Johnson, people don't know who he's The Rock. Yep. He does all his movies, Jungle Book and all that stuff. He saw that episode. And he emailed me and then called me and says, hey, this looks like it'd be kind of cool for a movie. I'm going, what? He goes, yeah, we could do a movie on this. But first, I'm going to bring in Ben Mesrick to write the book about it. And then we're going to write a script from the book. I'm going, that's kind of weird. But okay, the cart before the horse. And that's what happened. So that's how I met Ben Mesrick. He wrote the book. And then he sent it in Simon & Schuster. It was supposed to come out during the summertime, but they liked it so much. They said, no, we want this to be a big book, write 2 more chapters, and we're going to release it during the holiday season. Wow. And then, so he wrote 2 more chapters, and when he released just the basics before I went to the book, whatever they call the pre-book stuff. Anyway, New Line Cinema read it, picked it up, and then so they picked up the life rights and the rights to the book, basically. Yeah. So that's pretty cool. Now, they wrote a script. The script was written. It was ready. And then COVID hit, and that was pretty much the end of that. Yeah. And then they were just talking about it again about a month or so ago. And then now there's an actor's strike and a writer's strike, and everything's getting pushed off again. So maybe by the time I'm 90, I might see that.
I was gonna say they could get the Rock to play Chuck Zukowski, right? As played by Dwayne Johnson.
My buckles a little bit more.
Yeah, right.
Look practically the same.
Right. The Rock Zukowski.
Yeah, and it was pretty cool. One of the I was when I did a couple episodes for the Sci-Fi Channel, which was the Unexplained Files. Wait, I had that back there. That was a science channel. Sci-Fi was anyway, whatever it was. They sent me to Comic-Con in San Diego. And early in the morning, I went to the gym in the hotel they put me in, and Lou Ferrigno's over just to the left side of me working out. I'm going, oh, it's the Hulk, the original Hulk.
Right. Yeah.
And it kind of made me want to push the weight just a little harder that morning.
Yeah. That's some good inspiration in the gym.
Giant guy there, was he 6'6" or something? But yeah, it was kind of fun.
That's awesome. So it's interesting you bring up Robert Bigelow because I actually think it may have been him who was the first time I heard your name mentioned talking about you on another podcast. And he essentially brought up your work with cattle mutilation and was discussing in reference to Skinwalker Ranch. And because I feel like there's some ties between some of the cattle mutilations that have happened there and then all of the others that you've been to, mostly in Colorado. But have you actually worked with or talked to Robert Bigelow to like you guys have had a joint venture together and anything he's done as far as investigating going into the cattle mutilations?
So he was talking about me?
I believe so.
Oh, okay. Wow. Well, I'm impressed that someone like that was talking about me. No, I've dealt with him very briefly when I was with MoveCon. I was on the STAR team, and he was actually funding the STAR team. And that's when I kind of figured out that he wasn't really funding the STAR team, that somebody else was funding the STAR team, and he was just a middleman. He was kind of like just funding the money from one place to the other. And I did enough of my own, private detective work outside of ufology, and I actually found evidence that was true. So, and then I confronted the head of MUFON at the time, and then he acknowledged it. But we were just one-on-one, and then since then, he's acknowledged it publicly. But I came to him with the evidence. I'm going, yeah, so Bigelow, who is he working for? And because he's definitely not doing it for MUFON, he's doing it for himself and for somebody else. So that may have got back to him. But and then afterwards, like I said, when we were writing the book, I didn't want to step on any legalities. So I was talking to Ben Mesrick. I said, just kind of, tread lightly when you talk about Bigelow. But the cool thing is he actually, Ben Mesrick, interviewed Robert Bigelow's attorney on the East Coast, and he found out a lot of cool stuff that I just assumed maybe, and it turned out to be true. So it was pretty cool. But as for Skinwalker Ranch, okay, we've got one 40 miles away from my house right over here in Colorado.
Right.
And then actually there's two out here. And then we have the San Luis Valley. Then you have the Bradford Ranch in Arizona near Sedona. So there are places like that all over the U.S. And I can talk about that a little bit later if you want to kind of have an idea how to find them. But it's just those places that there's just a lot of activity, and I think I know why now, or maybe I'm guessing why. Just theorizing, looking at the data, and looking to see what's around the area. But but with Alien Highway, one of our episodes was outside of the Skinwalker Ranch in Utah, and we were a couple of miles away, and we were experiencing a lot of stuff. And then when I interviewed a neighbor, like the house right next to the ranch, because I've been out here 10 years, I haven't seen anything. I'm going,
wow,
yeah, it's kind of weird, but that whole area where the Skinwalker Ranch is, it's hot. So, for people out there that are watching this, you don't need to go to the Skinwalker Ranch. You don't need to be in the ranch. You can just be in that general area. So the one red flag, and you guys are probably, be a red flag for you guys too, being in the military or former military. The Skinwalker Ranch's security cameras were pointed out. Okay, but I just would assume. I walked up to the west gate of Area 51 years ago. Their cameras, very high-tech cameras, were pointed out. The Bradshaw Ranch in Sedona, the cameras were pointed in.
Interesting.
What does that tell you? It's not so much what's on the outside; it's what's going on in the inside. Now, that's what I was going to expect to see with the Skinwalker Ranch that I did. Area 51 made sense,
Yeah.
But if you got something that hot, you'd have cameras pointed on the inside to see what's going on.
No, yeah, that totally makes sense. I've protected quite a few things protected by fencing. And there are definitely cameras that point out because you're wanting to keep people out, but there's plenty of cameras facing the thing that you're keeping safe. Just put it that way. So
exactly,
right,
exactly, and that's what I was expecting to see, but I was a little disappointed. And the cameras I have in my house here for security cameras were more advanced than what they had at the Skinwalker Ranch.
That's kind of weird. That's definitely not what I would expect. Yeah, because it gets so much notoriety. You're like, I brought it up right in this podcast episode, but it's when you talk about these sorts of things, that's the first thing that gets mentioned, and it's one of the things that's mentioned in Ben Mesrick's book too. It talks about that incident where with the shape-shifting creature that everybody reported there, that talking about Robert Bigelow reading this file on it. It's just a lot of weird different things that seem to occur there. And I like that you said that, you're kind of putting this all together, because that was one of the questions I wanted to ask you. It's kind of hard to make this into a science, I feel like, because there's probably not a lot of people that do what you do, but where you may and through your journey, where you may be going as far as like a theory, and that's something that I wanted to ask you.
Well, the shapeshifters, we've seen that out here in Colorado, in El Paso County, where I live,
Really?
near the area where I just mentioned, maybe 30 miles, not 40 miles. Interesting thing happened there a couple of months ago, or a month and a half ago, I can tell you about it. It had nothing to do with
what happened? Okay. Oh, okay. No, if it's funny, I'm ready.
Oh, okay. Ready for this? Okay,
personal story?
Yeah, a couple of years ago, we traded in my ultra limited Harley for a trike.
Oh, man.
So I have a tri-glide. And the reason why I wanted to go to tri-glide, because out here in Colorado, there's a lot of dirt roads, a lot of county roads and places that you can get to, ghost towns and whatever. And you can't do that with your wife on the back on a two-wheeler, especially a Harley, because they're so torquey. So we got a trike. And so about a month and a half ago, I was researching. There's an empty missile base that's right in the area where it's our Skinwalker Ranch, where there's a lot of activity. So we were headed out that way. Just to see if I could find it. I forgot the GPS coordinates at home. I go, you know what? Let's see if I can find it. I was pretty close. I came pretty close to it, from what I think it was, because I saw some fenced off area, but I wasn't too sure. And my wife says, well, we should get going because we have to get back. I said, okay. So we're going down the highway. And I said, well, we can cut across this county road, dirt road, because we have a trike, right? And then we can make the other highway and make up a half hour. So, okay. So we're going down this county road, and it's what I thought was a cow in front of us. To the left, it turned out to be a black Angus bull. Now, he didn't have horns. He was young, but he's still about 1,200 pounds. And I real slowly went around it, because I've dealt with cows a lot of times being a mutilation investigator. And I know you don't go by them too fast, because if you scare them, you can hurt them, because they can panic, or you don't want to, make them aggressive. So I'm going by kind of slow, and that son of a gun charged me. Okay, right.
Challenged you.
He challenged me. And so I gunned the bike, and I got fast enough that he couldn't hit me head on, so he body slammed me. He did a hockey check.
Holy cow!
And my bike.
What'd that do to your bike?
Well, my bike's 1,200 pounds, and I'm almost 200 pounds. So right there, we're looking at 1,400 pounds. Yeah. But and my wife's on the back, but I could feel his stomach hit my thigh. And what happened was that was fine, but his back legs kicked up and then damaged my left rear fender and broke the taillight and stuff. But what's interesting about, and then we got, I just blew off after that.
Yeah.
But it was interesting talking to the insurance company, doing a claim on it. And I said, well, I was hockey checked by a bull. And I'm going, an animal? I go, a bull? I go, yeah, a bull. Kind of interesting, since I'm a cattle mutilation investigator, and hear what cow kind of attacks me. But what's even funnier was it became a comprehensive, only $100 off, because it was a farm animal.
Oh my gosh!
If it was a car, it would have been $500-600 deductibles.
Sure. Yeah. Well, that works out.
Yeah. So every now and then we have one of those interesting things. It's non-paranormal. I got a shitload of stuff that happened to me paranormal wise. That I could talk about.
Jump into that.
When you have there's things exciting in life that happens to you, and you brush it off. Yeah, we got hit by a bull. Yeah, it damaged the bike, but what a great story.
For sure. Absolutely.
It's like when I hit that water buffalo in Kenya.
I was just about to say, was that Zach and I were? Oh yeah, Zach and I were deployed together in Kenya, and he hit a water buffalo with his Humvee. I'll let you tell it, Zach, because you were there.
So I don't know if Brandon knew this, but there was an unofficial lap time at camp. So there was a route around the camp, and there was a certain Humvee that was a little less heavy than the other ones. So if you ever got that Humvee, you could go faster. So I may or may not have been trying to get the unofficial record. And it's like really dark out, and you're supposed to like drive with like your all your lights on, so you don't express yourself and stuff. So I'm coasting, and my gunner Obi, he last second tells me, he's like, "Oh, watch out!" And this water buffalo just like looks left, like his head comes into the lane. And he's got big old horns and everything, right?
Oh my God.
And it just smacked the right side of the Humvee, destroyed the whole front quarter of the Humvee. The headlight was gone, everything was gone, and I remember
it was jacked up.
Yeah, the Humvee was messed up by that water buffalo, but I got it. And I'm like looking at this water buffalo, and it's like neck's all contorted weird, and it's kind of like walking funny. And I was like, dang, like I hurt that water buffalo, because I probably hit it at like 55, 60, maybe 65 miles an hour. Yeah.
That's wild in a Humvee, man.
Yeah. And
Must have felt like you were re-entering the atmosphere. Seriously.
that's what they feel
you
like.
didn't have the explosive armor on it. That would have been even more cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stakes for everybody.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
But
Stakes for everybody.
Yeah.
This water buffalo though, he like snorted at me, but I could tell like he was
You're
not
so
right. Like
aggressive.
It was that.
I hit him hard enough so where he was not feeling it, and he walked off, and then I called it in, and then we brought the Humvee back, we swapped it. But I remember talking to the Kenyan Navy guys that we worked with like a couple days later, and I was like, "Hey, did you guys come across like a dead water buffalo somewhere or anything?" And they did. So that water buffalo died. They said they found it like in a field like a little further away from camp, and they knew it was that one because it had a big old dent in its horn.
Oh
And
man.
So camo paint transfer.
yeah,
Yeah.
Oh
so
man.
I
Suck
remember, I
it out
remember
of
when I remember like we're getting like driving back with Obi and Mitchell, and I looked at them and I was like, we were going like 20 miles an hour, right? And the water buffalo just came out of nowhere, and they're like, yeah, Sergeant Smith. And I was like, okay, good.
Oh yeah, yeah. I can imagine that could get you in trouble. Both my sons are military. One's regular Army, and he's in Japan right now, and the
Okay.
other one's Colorado Guard. He's a first sergeant, MP out here in the Guard. And every
Gotcha.
now and then, and they were both been deployed a couple, 3 times.
Yeah.
But some of the stories that I hear from them, you guys got some great stories too, I know. Because when they sit down and talk on stories, I'm going, really?
Yeah.
And they're not war stories; they're just stories that happen,
Yeah.
outside of that. It's pretty cool.
If there's dumb stuff that'll happen, we'll find it. We will find it, and it'll happen around us. Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah.
It
We're good at that.
Sounds like with me, sometimes I just
Right.
be in the area and the shit hits the fan, and
Right.
and there you are. You're just kind of like stuck in the middle of something going on. Yeah, that happened a couple of times with Alien Highway. We just flicked out.
So how do you decide which one of these are you going to actually investigate, and how many like calls or whatever do you get where you're like, that doesn't really sound like something I want to go out to?
Well, and that's a really, really good question. I'm glad you asked that, because I never get asked that, and it's really it's a good question, because everything that I do comes out of pocket, and I work full time, and I'm an IC mass design engineer, so I'm a graphics designer designing microchips, and I'm a consultant because 20 years ago when I was salary, I had issues trying to get away from the job to run some investigations, with management. Oh, you can't leave now. It's 5 o'clock. But there was a mutilation, they don't care.
Right.
Bigfoot sighting. Yeah, they don't care. So I decided to,
Bigfoot gonna make microchips for me? No, go back to work.
Yeah, exactly. So I went as an S corp, and then I was spending so much money on the UFO stuff that the account that I'm using for the S corp says you should turn your website into an LLC under your S corp, and you can start deducting all your equipment. And I'm going, why didn't I think of that? My God. And so basically, when you get these people asking me to do an investigation, there's a couple different things. First off, is it something that I can do that's in the vicinity? Is it in the state of Colorado? How many hours is it away? Can I break away from work? What's our work level right now? Is it really important to be able to break away from work? Because if I don't work, I don't get paid. Because I'm a contractor. If I don't show up on Tuesday, I don't get paid for Tuesday. Right. So that kind of goes through your mind. But then you're also looking at the event itself, and I never turn out a cattle mutilation investigation. The ones that I kind of have a tendency of turning down are abductions, and I never used to do that. At first, I was working with a lot of abduction cases, and then it started to get kind of there's a liability involved, because if a person actually believes they were abducted and they contact me and said, I've got abducted, I got these marks and that, is there any way you can check this out? And I've had people say, it's over here by my bikini line, and I'll show you. And I'm going, I'm kind of married. I don't want to, but kind of, I am married.
We've got to be careful.
Yeah, you got to be
careful. You might listen.
Kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah, on the other side of that door, she's probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've been in love with the same woman for 42 years. Just don't tell my wife. So basically,
you got it.
So basically, then you run into those issues. But the main liability is if someone actually experienced not a paranormal, but something else, and it's affected them physically and mentally. And you come in, you're not a doctor, you're not a psychiatrist. I mean, you're very liable for for making suggestions and what they shouldn't do. So now, what I do when someone says, I believe I've been abducted, I said, well, true abduction cases, the alien takes you. If the alien's taken you, then they've done something physically to you. First thing you got to do, you have to go see your doctor. You have to have a complete complete exam, a blood analysis and urinalysis too. And if you're having problems with visions or things happening, then you need to see a psychiatrist to make sure that's taken care of. All I can do is come down and see if I find any evidence that proves that something happened there. There's not too much I can really do with the abductee. Before, back in the day, we would say, yeah, do this, do that, do this, but that. But then over the years, people became sue happy, and it's really sad. But so now there's a big liability involved. But
what were some of the things that you guys back in the day, like you said, would tell people to do that you are weary of now?
Well, things that maybe a psychologist should tell you.
Okay.
Okay. Which is, I'm not a psychologist. Yeah, I took psych in college, but 2 semesters, big deal, right?
Right.
So, and I kind of think about, some of the things I used to say, which I really wasn't qualified to say.
And, so worried about bordering on like medical advice, essentially.
Yeah. Okay. And so I realized, I said, I can't go there. But I can still be an investigator. I can still investigate the area. I can look for high EMFs. I can look for, anything that's unusual, markings on the ground, markings on the side of the house, stuff like that. Anything, animals nearby are affected. There's a lot more that you can do rather than just dealing with the abductee themselves. That's a person. So, you have to,
right.
we have to make sure that they stay healthy. I'm starting to run into that now with cattle mutilations, because the last 5 years, some of the ranchers have been sick, and especially the ones that get too close to the animal, touch the animal. A couple of ranchers, their arm, they've lost feelings in the hand and the arm that they touched the animal with, got all tingly.
Weird.
Another case, a dog almost died because it was. It was in the flesh, kind of, gnawing on the flesh, and it nearly died, and they brought him back to health. Another case, just recently, in April of this year in Oregon, there was a mutilation case. And I always ask them now, because I've been doing this for so long, that, how do you feel? How are you affected? Are you feeling okay? Is everything okay with you health-wise, and mentally? And both him and his wife were having headaches. Not before, but afterwards.
Yeah.
So, and there's a theory to that too. So, so that's about as far as I go. And then when they say yes, then I say, okay, you really need to talk to your doctor. You need to make an appointment. You need to make sure that you're not affected physically long term. It's kind of weird, because when I do animal mutilations and I talk to the ranchers, after I get all the initial information I want, then I kind of say, okay, now here's something off the wall. Within the past week or two, or even 30 days before the mutilation, did you see anything unusual on your property? Anything strange, like lights, balls of light? And you'd be surprised. I would probably say 8 out of 10 have.
That's wild.
Yeah, it's wild. So they do see strange lights and balls of light, which are directly connected to the mutilations.
Are these illnesses that people are describing to you, do you think it's from like high levels of exposure to radiation? Is that what that is?
Exactly, but it's not radiation like you would think. Electromagnetic field is high frequency radiation. That's an EMF. I mean, your cell phone's right here. This gives off EMF. It gives off high frequency radiation. It's radiation. That's why I never use a Bluetooth. device in my ear. I think you might have one in your ear.
Yeah.
Because on a cell phone, I mean, it's one thing for podcasts because it's slow current. And I worked for Motorola. I contracted for Motorola in Fort Lauderdale, and the engineers there were designing a Bluetooth for the BlackBerry device, and none of the engineers would use the Bluetooth because they knew the amount of radiation. Because what and that was back then. I'm sure it's better now. But you know, when you have a Bluetooth, it's constantly talking to your phone, so it's a constant radiation link from your Bluetooth to your phone, and it's a high frequency radiation. And even with my phones, you know, I'll move the phone around. Sometimes I wear it on the right side. Sometimes I'll wear it on the left side. You kind of want to move it back and forth. Don't leave it in the same place. I know that because I know that there's high frequency radiation involved in cell phones because I've been in so many cell phone jobs, basically, you know.
Sure.
Different companies and stuff. You know, we've worked on cell phone devices. I kind of know that. Well, that's electromagnetic field. Now, what I've learned with animal mutilations is sometimes there is a large electromagnetic field in the area where the animal was mutilated. Now, we're humans. We're susceptible to EMF fields or EM fields. The reason for that is because we're walking, talking capacitors. You know, we give off a couple of volts.
Yeah.
And we're, like I said, we're capacitors. Each one of us has a unique frequency. And that's why that's why you walk up to someone and you go, you know, I could be that guy's best friend because I just feel so comfortable. You know, they back in the day in the 70s, it was an aura. Oh, yeah, we share the same aura, you know. But it's really frequencies. And each one of us gives off a separate frequency like you have fingerprints. Okay.
Right.
So, but if you have a certain frequency yourself that you're giving off or that your body generates, and it comes in contact with another electromagnetic field, and you're not compatible, you know, you can get nausea, you can throw up, you know, you have headaches and stuff. And so it's an EM field, high field. Same thing with, you've heard stories about never buy a house under electrical lines because, you know, high powered lines give off a constant EM field and you're getting inundated out here in the U.S. because we have so many politicians involved with the cellular companies. They don't talk about it, but if you read the scientific journals out of Europe, they tell you right off, you know, that you can get tumors from cell phones, you can get tumors from high voltage lines and all kinds of stuff. But somehow or another, out here in the U.S., we have a tendency of kind of like not talking about that.
Yeah, protecting business interests. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You're so free.
So that's what I think was happening is the couple walked up and there was still a high EM field involved. Now, if you want, I can kind of explain what a mutilation is.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Tell us, because I want to talk about, you know, probably some of your more interesting, what you would deem more interesting cases. But yeah, let's go ahead and establish this like baseline for people who may not be familiar with this phenomenon, what cattle mutilation is. Yeah.
Yeah, because I don't want to talk over you guys because this is your podcast.
Oh, no. You're like this. Sure, it's our podcast. You're our guest, but we want to hear from you. Yeah, we're here. Tell us. We're very interested.
So it's really cool, and I've done enough of these where I've found evidence to back up my claims. So for those people that say bullshit, I say bull. I know bulls now, so you know.
Get really close.
But so cows are basically a mutilation case. Let me see if I can find my face over here. So here's A. This is where the cow is grazing, whatever, right? And maybe he or she's away from, you know, the herd, or maybe they're near the herd, just the outside or whatever. Maybe they're right in the middle of the herd. It's hard to say because it's happened all different times. But they're taken from location A to location B. Location B, we don't know where that's at. But the mutilation takes place at location B. They're drained of blood first and then cut up. I know that for a fact because I've taken samples from animals that were mutilated to Colorado State University out here in Colorado. It's a big university that trains the vets in the Four Corners regions here. They look at the cuts, and so what I do is you'll see a cut in the animal, and I do a pie cut. So the vets can actually see the anomaly cut, right?
Yeah.
And they say it's, in some cases, or most of the cases, it looks like a scalpel cut, is what they said. It's that straight.
Yeah.
There's only been a couple of cases where it was serrated, jagged, perfectly serrated. But most of the time, it's like a scalpel cut. But there's never been any hemorrhaging, though. So since there's no sign
the
of
blood's
hemorrhaging,
gone.
the blood's gone. Right.
Yeah.
And every one of the cases I've done, true mutilation cases, the blood is taken first and then it's cut out. Now, people ask me, what's most common with every animal, the cuts, where the cuts are and stuff. At first, it used to be the cuts were in the glandular area, but basically the most common denominator is the blood. And I found a case back in the late 1800s, 1896, I think it was, out of Missouri, where there was a UFO sighting, and the next day, the rancher went out there, and there was 3 or 4 cows that were found dead, void of blood. So that was back in 1896 in Missouri. So it's been going on. Let me ask you this:
Are there reports of cattle mutilations in other parts of the world, not just the United States, Europe, Africa?
Yeah, it's interesting. Okay. Not a lot in India, which is kind of interesting, but there are cases of cattle mutilations, but mostly like Dominican Republic and the UK, the sheep. And so I've done investigations on sheep, goats, elk, of course, cows and horses. So
and they're all similar to the cows, like there's like the blood strain, and they fit the profile.
Yeah, absolutely. So after in location B, when they're done, whoever they are, right, they take the animal back close to location A. They just don't leave it there. They bring it back. And I know that from 2 investigations where a cow was calving, and she had her calf. And then right after she had her calf, what cows do is they eat the placenta to re-nourish themselves for the milk for the calf. Well, half the placenta had been eaten. The cow was missing, and about 55 yards away from the calf was the cow. And the cow was drained of blood, and the udder was completely cut out. So the udder itself, the whole udder, right, is just on a long skin, just like you take an X-Acto knife and go cut it out, right? And it's laying on its right side. It's kind of weird. Most of my animals that I've done, they lie on their right side and they're facing east to west. That falls into the 37th parallel theory later on. So you kind of learn one thing, goes to another, goes to another. And the calf was alive. The calf survived. And so if it was a predator, why didn't it take the calf? Why would it lure the mom away, kill the mom, take the blood, eat the milk sac perfectly, right, all in one night, and then leave the calf? And I called the rancher about a week or so later to find out how the calf was doing. The calf was reintroduced into the herd and was fine. The second case was, what I do with these mutilations is when I go to mutilation, after I'm all done with what I'm doing with the animal, then I do a spiral going outwards and looking for evidence. Okay. And so I was doing that over near Trinidad by San Luis, in between San Luis and Trinidad, Colorado. And as I was spiraling out, I had a person with me who was helping me. And we came across tracks, cow tracks, walking along the fence. It had rained the day before when the animal was killed. And it was muddy, and there was only one set of cow tracks, and it stopped. And I'm looking at this, and it stopped.
It yoinked up.
And it was done, and it was about 55 yards or so away from where the animal was. And and the only possible way that an animal could have done that is it would have to walk backwards inside its own tracks. It was one set of tracks, and it was just stopped. I'm going, okay, now I know. And now that I've done at least 2 of them, I know it's average 55 yards or so, because you measure it off. So they bring them back for whatever reason, and then off they go. Now, here's the part that kind of threw me later. From the very beginning, when you listen to the Linda Moulton Howells and the Christopher O'Briens, who were the leading people with cattle mutilations in the earlier, They say the animal's dropped. Well, I was a deputy. I was a reserve deputy out here for 8 years, and and towards the beginning of being a deputy, we're going through all different types, just outside the academy. After I was already in there, we're seeing films and stuff and how to prepare yourself for different circumstances. And one film was on jumpers.
Okay.
And how do you prepare yourself when you walk up to a body of someone who jumped off a building or something? And they actually had security footage of people that had jumped. And it's interesting how high a body bounces, when it hits the ground. And that at different, even if you fall 10 feet or 5 feet, your body's still going to move a little bit when you hit the ground. You're just not going to come down flat. Every one of the cases, and a true mutilation case is when you look at the animal, it's as if the animal is just placed there, just placed. There's no movement in the head, the legs, nothing. And even one that we did, Mike Duran's case, the animal was lying in the banks of the Purgatory River in the mud. Perfect, just in the mud, perfect. No movement, no struggle, no nothing. No struggle to try and survive, nothing. Whoever put it there was already dead, placed it down like it was a fiberglass cow. So I'm thinking, okay, so it comes down. And then after I saw the film, I'm going, well, if it's dropped, you're still going to see scuff marks. You're going to see movement because the animal is not, it's only been dead a day. So, rigor mortis hasn't set in, so it's not really hard. So you can move things. I'm like, God, that's right. I've never seen anything like that.
Yeah.
And then a couple of cases later, I picked up high EM fields near the animal. And I'm scratching my head and I'm going, what the hell? And this animal had a big gaping hole in the side of its head. And it was interesting because my son Chuck was with me, who's regular Army. And he was, I think was he on leave or something? I forget why he was here. No, it was in between. He had left the Army, joined the Guard, and went back in the Army. So he was out there with me, and he's very analytical. He goes, Dad, this just doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense. I'm looking at this. It doesn't make sense why a predator would eat the side of a head because there's no flesh. There's nothing there, and leave other parts of the body and on and on. And I'm hitting it with my EMF meter. It's a tri-field EMF meter. Tri-field EMF meters are meters that eliminate the human-made EMF. So you get like natural EMF. And this meter was blah, 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 blah. And it was the pegging the needle, which is well over 100 microteslas. Well, the Earth's magnetic field is 50 microteslas. I'm like, holy cow. Well, holy dead cow, This thing is, I'm getting a higher reading than the Earth's magnetic field off of the head of an animal. And so the next day I called Alpha Labs, who designed, the EMF meter. And he said, well, don't quote me on this. This is just me thinking, because I actually talked to a tech guy who actually was part of the design of different meters. He says it appears one of two things. There was something electronically placed in the animal at one point, and when it was taken out, the energy from the device was still in the skin and the muscle tissue of the animal and hadn't dissipated yet. Or there was some other type of energy force associated with that. I went, oh, okay. This is why I'm getting EMF. Well, this makes sense because UFO investigations where people say that something came down and touched down on the grass there or there, I get high EMF. I'm getting high EMF from the power of the craft. Now I'm getting high EMF from this animal. Am I getting high EMF from the power of the craft that did this to this animal? Or am I getting high EMF from the tools, electronic tools, the technology that was used to cut this animal up? Well, then a couple of mutilations later, back in Trinidad again, Tom Miller, who's had over 15, 16 mutilations. I've done 12 of his. So we're out in the middle of the field, and his cow's laying dead on the ground. Once again, it's pointing east to west. Stupid. But I have my truck sitting, my Ram 1500, and my gear's in the back. And one of the boxes had moved forward while I was forebying on the field. And so I hop in the back of the truck and I pick the box up and I pull my back. I go stretch a little bit. I look over and went, what the hell is that? There's a ring around that cow. I've never noticed it because I'm elevated. I'm looking and went, son of a bitch. She goes, that's a crop circle. But it's not a crop circle. It's an indentation in the ground. First time I've seen it. Not saying that they weren't there before. It's just the first time I've seen it.
Yeah, you got a different perspective.
Crap. So I go over there and I hit it with an EMF, and I'm getting, I hit inside the ring, outside the ring, and I'm kind of measuring. Okay, 8 microteslas, 15 here. Okay, not a lot, but there's still something going on here. And so I took dirt samples, and I sent the dirt samples from inside and outside the ring to the same soil analysis company that the BLM sends their soil to. That's how I found them. I went to the BLM site. Right. And I said, here's sample A, here's sample B. Tell me the difference. That's all I told them. I didn't tell them anything else. And I get back. Sample A, which was near the cow, the nutrients have changed. The nutrients that have to do with being water soluble. Right. So that's been changed compared to the other, sample I've taken. I said, okay, so what can change the nutrients in the soil and causes an EMF? Come on, it's obvious. It's an energy field that's doing it. And so after that, I started checking, the cow mutilation cases from then on and saying how many. And there was a couple more that had, rings around them. And then 2 other cases.
So that's not as common. That's not as common, this ring around them.
It might just have to do with maybe the soil, the vegetation. I did one in San Luis. It was a bull, and you could clearly see where it laid down in the grass that you could see that it was all pushed down, in about a 16-foot diameter. And then there was a case in Kansas City, Missouri, and I had the investigator out there take soil samples. And then there was a case in Georgia. I taught the rancher there how to take soil samples for me, and had them a bag, and they can mail it back to me. And so, Colorado, Missouri, and then even Georgia, the cations, the CECs, the nutrients were different from inside the circle than outside the circle. And I saw that all, and I was like, okay, here's a pattern. I see it now. Yeah. It's a pattern on the soil, because Missouri's high in clay, Colorado's high in sand. I don't know about Georgia, but so I'm going, okay, it has nothing to do with the soil. Here's a thing I learned after that, because before that, some of the animals, when they came down on the ground, they hit the ground so hard they created a crater. It's like if you take your fist and you hit the sand on a beach, you create that. Well, you guys worked in the beach in the Army, all sand out there, so the craters everywhere. But if you hit the sand, then you can see the little crater. And I was seeing that with some of the cases. I'm going, this thing came down hard. And then a couple of cases where we were able to look inside the animal and actually open the animal up. The rib cage was broken from the backbone. Internal bones were broken. Legs were broken. They came down that hard. And I'm thinking, okay, I know it wasn't dropped. We skinned. I had the Colorado veterinary skin the animal to make sure you don't see any strap marks or anything like that. Never seen any strap marks of how it was lifted or anything like that. So an energy force places the animal back down. This is the best I got, guys. This is all and this is this is just based on the data. I'm not. It's kind of a theory, but it's all based on data that I picked up, that it appears that an energy force picks up the animal, takes it somewhere, and then when it brings it back down, depending on the amount of force or depending on the intensity of the energy force, the animal can be placed down gently or placed so hard that the bones will break internally.
So what would, it almost sounds like there's 2 different processes then. If you have one that's setting it down gently and the other that's kind of, in a way, slamming it down in a very controlled way, right? Do you think that there's 2 separate processes or like 2 separate?
I think what I'm asking? Same process at different elevations.
Okay.
Right. And you guys would know that, shooting elevations and stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
the higher the elevation with the energy, the more intense the energy's got to be able to put the animal back down. That could happen. If it's lower to the ground, the less energy you would need, or else you drive that animal 5 feet in the ground, right? Depending on the energy source. So my guesstimate, it has to do with, the height of the craft or the height of whatever's doing this,
sense.
Elevation wise. So this is what's pretty scary about animal mutilations, is there's enough evidence that it's an energy source that's doing it.
Yeah.
And I've been able to measure the energy source on the animal and then on the ground. Now, let's talk about the ranchers. Well, the ranchers see these balls of light flashes and stuff, and I do have one quick story. Rancher Miller, who I used in Alien Highway. Matter of fact, beyond Skinwalker Ranch, they contacted me, and they wanted me to help them with Rancher Miller for their show, but I said, only if I'm on the show. And they said, well, I don't know. We have our own guys. I said, yeah, pass. So you're on your own with this one. And don't use anything on my website because it's copyright infringement. See ya. Click, Well, now click. You can't slam a phone down anymore.
No.
So Rancher Miller has two he has a ranch house, 2 homes. He has a ranch house and he has the home that they live in. And the ranch house is near the corrals, so if he knows he's got to get up early in the morning, do something with the animals, he'll sleep, especially when it comes calving time, right? That's usually when he does it. So it's a night. He's laying in his bed. He's right next to a window. Very feng shui, I guess, or maybe not. And he sees these 2 balls of light about the size of, bigger than a softball, smaller than a volleyball. And they're going like this. And it goes straight up and out of the view of the window frame, right? And he just watches going. Now, he's seen balls of light before. It's nothing new to him, because him and his wife, Sally, have both seen them out there, but this is the first time it's been that close to him. And he's just kind of like watching as he sees it goes up. And then it disappear, and then his bed starts shaking. And he feels this tinging feeling from here go across his body to his left side, and is gone. And then the bed stops
scanned, maybe?
He was, passed over the top of him.
Yeah.
Top of the house.
And then after a couple of minutes, he started feeling the left side of his body
going back the other way,
tingling again, and to the right, but he didn't see the lights, right? But to the right again, he could feel it, and the bed was shaking. And he was thinking, because they do have, there's a lot of hauntings out there in Trinidad too. Some may be hauntings, some may not be, and that's what I'm thinking. What he thought were hauntings, I don't think it's the case. I think it's something else. So he goes, what with the bed shaking? It was just like, The Exorcist with Linda Blair, right? And
scary either way.
Yeah, and I said, okay, Tom, don't take this personally, but tell me a little bit about your bed. What type of bed is it? It wouldn't happen to have a metal frame and metal springs by any chance, would it? He goes, yeah, it's an old style bed. It has metal. I'm going, here you are. It was a high energy field, a high electromagnetic field. And I don't know if you can hear that chirping in the background. Could you hear it?
Sorry. Yeah.
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah, so let me bury my phone. It's work. We run a project, and they're just sending it out to everybody.
You're good.
My stuff is, all about that stuff. Contacting you in the middle of the night. Hey, did you do this?
Right.
Yeah.
So I told him, I said, no, it's the high EM field from those 2 balls of light. And the energy that you felt was the energy coming from the 2 balls of light, like they were scanning you, or just could have just been, maybe the energy is more columnized. Don't know. I really don't know. And you just felt that. And then it came back again. And then when it came back again, the bed starts moving again. Because he mentioned he had one other time where him and his wife were in the living room talking to his sister, and a knife, a big butcher knife, flew across from one counter to the other side in the kitchen. Whoa. And he got up and goes, holy shit, we got ghosts. I'm like, maybe not. Maybe something. Because I said, what else was out there? Anything metal? No, we just had used the knife for something other laying on the counter. I said, so that was the only metallic thing on a wooden counter? And he goes, yeah. I said, I don't think it was ghosts.
Yeah. could see why you would think that, though. That's really, man.
Yeah.
Well, and that's what you get. You get, and that's why a few years ago I had to learn how to do ghost investigations, because I was getting cases where people were saying they were abducted, and or they had not abducted, but there was some type of contact.
Mm-hmm.
And it turned out that that wasn't the case, because it didn't fit, from my experience, the alien agenda type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
It was totally different,
Okay.
So that would be more of a haunting.
Yeah.
And then vice versa, where people think they're being haunted, or they have a ghost or a spirit. It could be something else. So I started hanging with Pikes Peak ghost hunters and the ghost hunters out here in Colorado Springs. Went with them a few times and started doing ghost investigations on myself. I don't do that a lot, but I did enough of them that I already had the equipment.
Yeah.
So I did enough of them where I could tell the difference now between the two. Especially when I'm talking to the witness over the phone, or talking to them eye to eye. I can say that doesn't fit the bill to that, but maybe you need to talk to a ghost hunter.
So what would somebody say to you then that they think maybe they're having a haunting, but from what you're hearing from them, you think it may be more close encounter related?
Well, it's for the main thing at first is the flashes of light from outside.
Okay.
That's kind of like a first clue. And
Right.
then after that, it was, and then after they feel the flash, after they see the flashes of light or something, then they get that tingly feeling,
Mm-hmm.
like you get right before there's a lightning storm, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's so much, ozone in the air that the hair in your arms starting, they feel that. And then it's nighty night.
Lost time.
They think they see a shadow, and then they just go to sleep. And then they wake up and wonder what happened. That's not generally the case with ghost hunting, or
Right.
or being haunted, or just being visited by a loved one, But it's a dead loved one, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
It's so it's if it's gradual and it's a long experience, it's more of it's a spiritual thing. But in other cases, and then if they see lights, they see a light go through their house or something, I say, can you see through the light?
Mm-hmm.
And if they say, yeah, then that's an orb. That's spiritual. If you can't see through the light, that's a probe. Now, what probes are, and I don't like some of these UFO guys out there in these UFO shows, because they'll say that. They'll say, oh, we're UFOs and I can see orbs everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
No, you're not seeing something pertaining to UFOs. You're seeing something else. Probes, they're mechanical probes, and I've recorded them. I videotaped them in Missouri. We actually recorded them, Alien Highway. We recorded them too. So those are balls of light, and they're solid.
Right.
And they have their own agenda. They're doing whatever they're doing, if it's checking out the environment or whatever they're doing. And I kind of have a feeling that might be the case, just because of some of my investigations. But I have seen orbs when I've done investigations, like at Stanley Hotel at Estes Park, and a couple of other places out here in Colorado, where you see, and you just see kind of like this, just like, kind of go by. And you're like, well, that was cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'll leave now.
Right.
You talked about like the agenda. You said like when people think they're being haunted or they thought they were like visited. You said like the alien agenda. What do you mean by that? Do you think, is there like key things that every potential abduction from like aliens or extraterrestrials that they do? Like what is their potential agenda?
Well, I mean, what I mean by the alien agenda is, I mean, basically, it's they got to park the craft somewhere, right?
Yeah.
It's either they're over your house or next to your house or something, and you'll pick up high EMFs if it's near the house or on the ground. I have a cool story about that I can tell you in a second, but it's so that kind of like, okay, they have their own agenda how they do things. It's kind of weird because some people, it kind of threw me at first, but some people talk about going through the window or going through the wall.
Okay.
And they can go through the wall and they go and so I was thinking maybe they're always going through a window. And then the more I studied, this was a few years ago, the more I studied, the more I realized that even within our own scientific community, they're trying to pass solid matter through solid matter. And I read a pretty cool paper about it years and years ago that nothing's really solid. It's just impacted with, so you can actually pass things through solid matter. And they've done it in certain cases. Well, Buckaroo Banzai did, right? Went right through them out. If you've ever seen Buckaroo Banzai, you probably haven't. You're too young.
Okay.
But you're going to have to watch that now that I mentioned it. And anybody out there that that heard me, now they're going to have to watch it.
Yeah.
So I joke because this alien guy right here, he's wearing a Buckaroo Banzai headband. So,
okay.
Anyway, so they could be using technology that they can pass people through walls. I don't know. It's they do have very high tech instrumentation ships, and Commander Fravor, the fighter pilot. It's funny because it's one thing, and I get these debunkers and these skeptics all the time. Well, he doesn't know what it is. He's just a pilot, just a human. I'm going, dude. First off, he's highly trained, so he's trained to know what our allies and non-allies have for weapons out there. He knows that. He knows about the closest he can get to what they're hiding. What they're hiding from us, we don't know, but as closest to what they're hiding from us. And then, if that's not good enough for you, the instrumentation is about 1,000 times smarter than the pilot, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So you got these computers on board, and the fighter pilots, they're calculating in nanoseconds. This is and analyzing and coming up with solutions in seconds. Shooting solutions probably a matter of a couple of seconds. You could probably get 100 shooting solutions just because now the computers are so fast, and a lot of fighter pilots will have a couple of computers working together. So, and then the instrumentation, is designed out there to be able to identify anything that's man-made. Any type of exhaust, heat signature, radiation signature, blah 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 blah. They're looking for all that, and yet the instruments don't pick up any of that. So I tell those people, you really need to think before you talk, or at least need to research a bit before you start, dissing our fighter pilots, because they're far more experienced in what they do and know what they do than what you think what they do, type of thing.
Absolutely. If you've watched that video and listened to them talk, they're genuinely perplexed by what they're seeing. They're not, what the maneuvers that the Tic Tac, right, is doing, they're marveled at. They're marveled by what's going on because of the way it's moving, how fast it's moving. And then even the route they planned on going on those trips out, it was meeting them on those waypoints, I suppose. Right. And so that, is to me indicative of something intelligent, right? And so there is the fear that, hey, that might be something that's enemy, and that's what you may think. But then at the same time, we don't know anything that our enemies have that can do something like this and move that way, so to say and suggest that they just don't know what they're talking about is a little wild,
It's ludicrous.
But
and it's funny too, because those people go, well, how can they figure out where the meeting point is after an altercation in the sky? And that's talked about in briefing, and it's changed every day at briefing where they all go to, right, pretty much, to assess what just happened.
Sure.
How do they know that? Let's see, it's simple. They were hacked. Big deal. We get hacked. The CIA gets hacked. U.S. Bank got hacked. My wife's bank account got hacked. Money was taken out Sunday. So, so you have to think about this. We have the experience of technology right now. These hackers aren't any more intelligent than you and I. They're just good at what they've learned, and they're good at what they're doing. During COVID, it's funny that during COVID we knew what jobs were essential and what jobs weren't essential. People learned real quick that they were working for non-essential jobs. And those essential jobs that people used to make fun of, like the garbage collectors, the plumbers, and all that stuff, realized pretty damn quick that those are the essential people, not the people working in Starbucks.
Yeah, exactly. Not the waiter at Applebee's, right?
Not the waiter, not the cooks at Applebee's, not Applebee's, right?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. So they learned real quick that that there's foo jobs, and then there's jobs that you need for society to be able to keep going on. And then so it's real quick, mechanics and stuff like that. Not that I'm knocking the Starbucks guys, but sometimes they because they're so. Some of those guys think they're all that. I haven't been friends with a couple of Starbucks people, and I always joke with them about that. And no, I can't make a good latte, so they're better at me at doing that. But I'm better at them at designing microchips than they are. So my wife and I worked, my wife and I worked through COVID. She worked for a plumbing company. And the plumbing company is a necessity. Microchip design is a necessity. So
absolutely,
we didn't get the opportunity to sit at home and collect money like a lot of other people did. We still had to work for ours. So
I did too. That's for sure. So being active duty during all that. So
but I hate to be. I don't mean to be mean with people who have those jobs. But if you have those jobs, that was a wake up call during COVID. That if the stock market crashes and things don't look great, and the economy's going backwards, that it's usually the foo-foo jobs go out first, then the jobs that keep the society going and keep everything going. So if you get into a job that that is a necessity, then you're good to go, and you're not going to, it won't be closed down. But, car salesman. So,
You said you had a story, Chuck, about the parking where the craft parks.
Oh yeah. So really
I don't want to lose it.
Okay, I'm already going to somewhere else. So so we were shooting an episode. So 7 out of the 8 episodes for Alien Highway back in 2019 were my active investigations. The 8th episode was Malibu, which something underwater base. I don't live in California anymore, so but these were my active investigations, and we turned those into episode by adding other things. So one of them was in Missouri. I think it was Salem, Missouri. I didn't even know they had a Salem in Missouri, but it was really cool because they had supposedly a couple months back, a craft had landed near this guy's ranch and a ranch house, and so I talked to him, and there had been some unusual things happening, not only there but in that whole area. So we went basically to the town, and we're like talking to everybody. But when we went, the thing is we had a good picture of this ring that was left a couple months prior near the ranch house. And the production guy, the showrunner, was talking to me. He says, well, we're going to try and sort of find out where that ring is. I go, I could tell you exactly where that ring is just by looking at the picture. And he goes, how's that? I said, well, because, remember the old overheads? I don't know if the military still uses that now. And they're transparent pictures. So I said, we'll just take this picture. We'll make it transparent. We'll stand right there. We'll line everything up in the background, the house, trees, everything. We'll know exactly where that ring is. We'll lay flags down. He goes, that's brilliant. And I go, no, it's not. It's innovative. That's all it is. You just have a problem, you fix a problem. So my son was holding up my son Daniel, who's the first sergeant. Who was on my team. So he's holding up the picture, and he's telling me where to place the flags. It was all great. And so what I was going to do was, for TV, I was going to go in. I was going to take soil samples, and we were going to take them. We did take them to soil analysis place in Missouri to have them analyzed. But we're reenacting what you would do with an active investigation.
Right.
So I'm going in the circle with a bag and my Marshall trawl to open up the dirt, dig in there. And the cameraman behind me, he's shooting with an $85,000 red camera. The manufacturer's red, and they're the same cameras they use to shoot the Marvel movies with. Okay. So they're not cheap cameras. These are expensive cameras. He's following me in, and as soon as he steps into the circle, and I didn't realize it, his camera died.
Oh,
and it reset and just went out. And he goes, I don't know, something's wrong with my camera. And I looked at it, light bulb on the door going, you're in the circle. Holy shit. And I ran back to my box and, of toys, right? And I pulled out my EMF meter because I didn't think about it because we weren't at that part yet. You walk around with an EMF meter, and sure enough, I was still getting high levels of electromagnetic field, so high that it actually mucked with his camera. And not only that, but but the pilot that was flying the drone overhead, doing the overhead shots, afterwards, when he went to go land the drone, it wouldn't land. Now, my drone, my DJI Phantom 4 or whatever it is, it has a camera sensors on the bottom, and it lands itself. It knows where the ground is. This thing couldn't find the ground, so it just hovered about 5 feet. It wouldn't land. It goes, there's no ground here. It's confused. And the drone pilot on our team goes, I've never seen that happen before. But he just walked over, just grabbed it, and walked away, and went, whoa! So then I talked to Travel Channel, the executive producer of Travel Channel, and I said, please, can we break the fourth wall on this episode to show that the cameraman's camera went out because it's huge, because it's proven evidence. And she did. She agreed because she was in a UFO. She's a UFO type of person. So I wanted to break the fourth wall all the time and talk to the production company because I think that the audience feels more at home when you're doing that.
Definitely.
But anyway, so that was pretty cool that even after a couple of months, there was such a high EM field still left there that it mucked with this professional camera. It's happened to me a few times with my cameras, but I've never seen it done with a camera like that.
You talked a lot about EMF, right? And then you talked a lot about like ghost hunters. And both you and ghost hunters use EMF detectors. And it kind of is weird to me because there's all these different theories about aliens out there, UFOs, that they're from another planet, another galaxy, or we're talking about things that are interdimensional and that they're here, but maybe on another plane. And that's definitely a theory that gets thrown around with ghosts as well, that you have this correlation of electromagnetic fields and testing it, and you say, oh, EMF is going up, right? So we're getting some sort of paranormal activity and a haunting, and that's measurable. And the same goes for alien activity. Do you think that throws some credence into the camp of that this is more of an interdimensional phenomenon that's happening? Or are these things that are coming to our planet from another planet and interacting with us in this really obscure way?
Well, I think an EMF is such a broad range, though. Well, it's actually, I don't. It's if you look at the wave spectrum, it is kind of broad. So there could be different levels within the EMF that our meters are picking up. They just pick up the whole EMF. It's high frequency radiation, and there's probably infinity different types of frequencies in between that we don't know about. But so spirit is energy by itself. Now, ghost investigators have been using EMF meters for a long time, but UFO investigators have equally been using EMF meters for the same amount of time because of the trace elements of technology leaving some type of a trace. So what I've found personally doing ghost investigations, if there's something near me, and it happened in Colorado, South Park, I know there really is in South Park, Colorado, but it's a ghost town, is what it is. That's why they get away with it. But it's near. I just drew a blank. I'm sorry. I just forgot the name of the town that it's sitting in. I'm sure people are going.
No worries.
Anyway, there's a hotel there that we did a ghost investigation at, and at the time my son was dating his wife, and so there's 3 people over here. So we're like, I'm looking at myself, so make sure I get this right. So it's like 3 people here, 3 people here. I got an EMF meter at the end. I got night vision camera set up, and we're inside a basement of this hotel that used to have tunnels going to other stores and stuff. Because back in the day, during Prohibition and stuff, the drinks would pass through the tunnels from one establishment to the other. And somehow a couple of the tunnels ended up at the brothels. But anyway.
Those go hand in hand.
Of course. But there was a time back when where there was a doctor that particular motel was a brothel, and every now and then a doctor from Denver would come out and do abortions.
Okay.
And then the fetuses were just pretty much buried or thrown in the cellar or in the the basement area where we were. So that's why I was there, because there's been a lot of activity there.
Okay.
And I tell you, it's pitch black. I couldn't see, my son actually and my daughter-in-law were sitting on the right side, and then Matt Morgan and two other people on my team were on the other side. And it was really dark. I couldn't see the other people, barely. And we're talking, and I'm not getting anything. And so we're going right down the road. If you're doing a ghost investigation and you're in charge, but you're not getting any responses, you pass it to the person beside you. Okay. Because there could be one person in your group that may have that frequency, or or be intuitive.
They're tuned in,
right? That they're more tuned in. And as it turned out, it was my son, and that makes sense because he's ADD. He's got all kinds of it.
It's every frequency.
Yeah, he's broke around everywhere. And it got down to him, and he was asking questions, and the meter was getting a little buzzy and stuff. And all of a sudden, we all saw it. As dark as it was, we saw a black shadow run in between us. Just not run, but go. And then my meter went because there's an alarm on my meter, so I could hear it. When the meter moves, and two of my cameras, one pointed behind me to where the fetuses were buried, and one pointed forward. At the same time, the video kind of went. So it was an EM field. It was an apparition, but it was an EM field that the meter picked up, and then the cameras, it distorted the cameras, and we saw the shadow go running by, and we did feel the cold. It was just like you see in the movies. It was a cold breeze, and So I know then from that and a couple of other cases that I've done ghost investigations that the spirits themselves are a high energy field, and our meters are just able to pick up. EMF meters are able to pick that up. Now with the aliens, though, it's probably more technology than it is, or the technology they use maybe during an abduction or whatever. Now you're talking about interdimensional, and some people think at the very beginning, well, these craft, they're just disappearing. It's just they're just going into another dimension. Well, really? Because maybe they're just too quick.
Or cloaking.
Oh, it's a cloaking device, exactly. And it's just a cloaking device, or they're just too quick. Now, you can do this with your fingers, and it makes it look like that you're all distorted and stuff because our mind is trying to figure out what our eyes are seeing, right? But so when we see something like that, and once it's there and once it's not there, it doesn't necessarily mean that it just disappeared. It just went shot so fast, it doesn't streak. That's technology. Now, light. The reason why things streak is because of light, right? But if the energy sources they are using doesn't affect the light around us, you're not going to see a streak. You're not going to. Oh, and if the exhaust system isn't within our light spectrum, you're not going to see an exhaust. I'm going to jump into my theory now with hydrogen. Every one of the mutilation cases I've done so far, the cows are near a water source. A lot of UFO sightings are near a water source. Okay, so why water? Well, water's got hydrogen and oxygen. Well, we can get oxygen from the air. So if the UFOs are using one of the two, if they're using water, what are they using? Are they using hydrogen and oxygen? Well, they can clearly, easily pull oxygen out of our atmosphere, but not hydrogen. It's oxygen and nitrogen. Oxygen is everywhere around us, but hydrogen is in our water. That's where you extract it from. So it's real easy for anybody out there listening. It's really easy for you to do it. Just be careful. Take a 9-volt battery, take a wire on each end of the two terminals, and a bare, 2 wires that are bare, and just drop them, push them into a water cup. And when you see a little mist comes up, that's pure hydrogen. So it's electrolysis. It's the energy of the battery turning water. It's removing the hydrogen from the water into a mist, and that's energy. Hydrogen, and it can blow up depending on what you want to do, or you don't strike a match. But
solid advice.
So my theory is these crafts are using hydrogen as an energy source.
Okay.
Now, if you look at our sun, guess what? Our sun uses hydrogen as an energy source.
Yeah.
It uses hydrogen in fusion, right? Or fission. I forget one of the two. And
There's
and so
hydrogen fuel cell cars.
exactly. But here's what's interesting about hydrogen in our sun. So our sun uses hydrogen to create energy. What is the exhaust of our sun? It's ultraviolet A and ultraviolet B light. That's the exhaust from our sun. Guess what we can't see? We can't see ultraviolet A or ultraviolet B. We know ultraviolet A exists because we get sunburned, and ultraviolet B.
Right.
And matter of fact,
I do get sunburned.
yeah, and really, if you're above the 37th parallel across the United States, here's another part of my theory. If you live above the 37th parallel, half the time during the year, during wintertime, like right now, you're more susceptible to vitamin D deficiency because you don't have that particular ultraviolet ray hitting you like other parts, like California and other places like that. So people during the wintertime for so many months are actually vitamin D deficient. So now you have Commander Fravor, right? Now, his instruments are looking for all kinds of stuff. Now, the instruments in a jet can't look for ultraviolet A or ultraviolet B rays because all you get to see is sunlight. They can take a combination. They can look at ultraviolet A or ultraviolet B and heat source of some source, and maybe use the two to try and find a tracking. I mean, technology is pretty good out there, so they could use it in that case. But if they're just looking for ultraviolet A exhaust or ultraviolet B exhaust, how are they going to do that? First, they have to know how intense the exhaust is. How is it different from the ultraviolet rays we're getting already? They have to have something to start with to be able to design something to be able to detect it, right? So they don't see an exhaust, but the exhaust is there because if the craft is using hydrogen and they're using some type of a fission control, then the exhaust is going to be ultraviolet A or ultraviolet B, and it doesn't have to be coming out of the back. It could just be a glow, right? Because we're everything with us is Newton's, what's it, third law or second law? Third law. For a reaction, there's a reaction. We're stuck on that. But theories change as science gets better and better and better.
Right.
So there could be exhaust, and I think there is an exhaust. They just can't see it because it's not within our light spectrum.
Well, they
makes a lot of sense.
They probably could have saw the exhaust. I know a lot of what's been released is very little to what they've said they have. Like they have way more videos and other stuff of these things. They could probably have the scans of the exhaust. They just don't want to show it.
Well, okay, yes, and the reason for that is there's two governments. There's an inside one is doing their own thing, and then there's the one that you guys work for, and the one that I've been on contracts with, So it's unfortunate. So there could be a whole MIB, and I do know that there's an internal.
Honestly.
I mean, within the past couple of years, a few years, when I first back in 2000 or so, I found my sister and we did an archaeology dig for the Sci-Fi Channel. I didn't like what they were doing because
is this the one in the book?
Yeah, they were using us as more like just background, and we were digging down to what I thought was the Jurassic period. And a couple of years before that, I got off of a dig with my wife, and I did a dig at the Raven site in Arizona, which is a Anasazi site, and we were only digging down 10, maybe 15 inches to go back 800, 900 years, right? And how they had us dig down 2 feet, and they were looking for artifacts and stuff. Now, I have an idea why they wanted us to do it, because they seem to think that when the craft came down, there was a gouge, and there was a big gouge, and the military covered up the gouge, so we were digging down looking for the gouge, and the whole time we're digging down looking for the gouge, there's a backhoe sitting in the background, right? So eventually they brought the backhoe in and cut a big, so we were there, we knew. And my sister and I were the only 2 investigators that were there. So after the show wrapped, I asked the archaeologist, Dr. Bill Dolman, if my sister I could come back the next day while they're out there cleaning up, and then I want to run my own dig. I want to do a strip dig, 1 meter by 15 meters, and just go down top dirt about 6 to 8 inches at the most, right? Because if anything's going to be there, it only needs to go back Back then it was like 60, 65 years.
Mm-hmm.
And the second strip dig, we found a little piece of metal.
Mm-hmm.
Out of the whole week we were there with the Sci-Fi Channel, we never found any evidence like that. Off my dig, we did.
Right.
Not putting my own horn, not patting myself on my back, but that's what it is. And I asked the Sci-Fi
Almost like
Channel.
you've been doing it for a while.
Well, I mean, but it's so I asked the Sci-Fi Channel, can you analyze this more? They all the artifacts that we found, they analyzed it. They basically took it to the lab and they did a visual and they said da 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 da. They said the little piece that we had looks like the back of duct tape, and that's as far as it goes. I said no, it's not, and I tell you why. It's because when my sister, after I dug it up, she sifted, she found it. When it hit the sunlight, it's triangular, but not a perfect triangular, just kind of cut triangular in shape. All three sides folded up when it hit the sun, which means it's light conducive or energy conducive or heat or something. When we put it back in the envelope, it flattened up. You take it back out, it curled up again. I'm going, duct tape doesn't do that,
That sounds eerily similar to the way that I want to say is wasn't it Major Marcel described the wreckage that they recovered from the Roswell site, just the way that it crumpled, and then am I depicting that accurately?
Yeah, absolutely. So they said, nah, I'm not gonna do it. So I tried for about a year or so to do it the right way. And I said, heck with these guys. So I went right to Dr. Bill Dillman. I said, have you archived that piece yet? And he said, no, we haven't. I said, is there any way I can get it from you? And I'm contracting at a microchip company out here, and they have an electron scanning microscope on one of their floors.
Right.
And it just so happens the operator of the SCM is into UFOs, and I bet you I can convince him to let me use that ESM at night after hours.
Sure.
And sure enough, and so I said, can you let me? And I said, I'll come down to Albuquerque and pick it up from Colorado Springs. He mailed it to me. I'm like, oh my god!
Whoa. Yeah.
I got
so many things to go wrong.
A lot of things. So basically, I got it. Took it to company. We had an ESM on it, and it turned out to be an aluminum alloy. And then we there was a software update. We did it again, and it's aluminum alloy. This was in the book. And then so I go, okay, we got something here. ESMs are pretty expensive. They're about $250, $300 an hour.
Okay.
On a regular market to do to check. So then that year I went to Roswell with my sister. We did a press release in Roswell asking for help from a lab to analyze this piece that we found. And guess who popped up? Robert Bigelow. He comes in, we'll do it. BAS, BAS or something. And Bigelow Aeronautical something. Anyway.
Yeah.
So I talked to the board of directors at the museum that had the piece, because I took it back myself personally, and I said I had to do all the paperwork for them to agree to give it to Bass or to Bigelow. But I said we're not giving them the whole piece; we're just going to give them half of it, cut off a piece. So there's still a piece sitting there. So we sent a piece to Bigelow. Within 1 week, I got an email from Bigelow saying, "Well, the lab says it appears that it's not a known." Oh, it's an unknown polymer. It's not that it's unknown to the planet. It's just not known, meaning it's not registered polymer. And well, that throws out everything that you could think that it could be, like, back a cigarette, packings, and bubble gum or whatever. Throws all that away because everything you use for commercial purposes is registered. It has to be. And copyrighted too on top of that.
Right.
So this was great. And so I said, what's next? And I talked to the scientist there that was working in the lab. And he says, well, we're going to do isotope analysis to see if this sucker's from this planet. And I went, yeah, let's do it. And that's the last I heard of him.
How long ago was that?
Well, no, that was a few years ago, right? This was before I found out that, Bigelow worked for Pentagon. That was in 2015. So this was back in 2006 or 2005, somewhere around there. And, or I forget, somewhere around that area. But, so for a year I tried, and it's in the book. I even drove to Las Vegas. I didn't try to break in, but, I was like outside, trying to find someone I could talk to. But in the book, that's what made it look like I was obsessed to try to break into Bigelow. Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, nothing like breaking and entering, right? So, anyway, a year later, I got an email back saying, "Oh, it was nothing. We sent the piece back." I went, "Yeah, okay." So,
Oddly suspicious.
Let's go forward here. Let me get over here.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can capture a screen.
Mm-hmm.
See screen. See if this works. It's trying. Nothing's happening. There, let's try this one. It's working. It's doing something.
Yep.
Did you see it yet?
Metal alloy. Yes, it's metal alloy found in 1947 Roswell crash.
Yeah, exactly. I just don't see the screen on my screen, so I didn't know that you could see it. So you see that little sucker right there? Oh, there. Now okay. So on June 3rd of this year, I don't have to look at the camera now because you can't see me. So on June 3rd of this year, I was talking to Frank, who works at the he's a professor at the Military Institute in Roswell, Frank Kimbler, and his degree is in geology. And we've been friends on and off for a few years. After I did the dig and found a piece of metal there, and we did the press release, Frank had moved to Roswell, and then he saw that stuff. He researched it, and he found exactly where the debris site was, and he went over there himself. And he's an avid gold hunter with a metal detector, and he actually found a couple of pieces. Contacted me, and then so we've had this kind of like acquaintance back and forth. Well, this year, I was going to. Both of us are lecturing in Roswell. I'm lecturing for the Roswell Daily Record, and he's lecturing for the museum. And I said, I want to go back. I want to go to the debris site, and I'm going to shoot some drone footage and pictures for the presentation. He says, "Oh, cool, let's go." And then I'll bring my metal detector. Now you have to understand that we've metal detected this place. I metal detected that place back in 2000. I metal detected again throughout the years. MUFON organization out of Nevada had a bunch of people out on a TV show with all their metal detectors. It turns out they're using the wrong metal detectors because even metal detectors have different frequencies. The metal detector that finds these little suckers are the gold hunters. The metal detectors like the Fisher Goldbug Pro, they're specially designed to find gold, so the frequencies are different, okay? So he found a couple pieces out there, and he gave me this one right over here. This was the area that, this is the Roswell debris site. This is what it looks like out there. It's just a desolate area. It's 2.5 to almost 3 hours to get out there. And the last part of it, you have to 4x. You're on a county road, and then you have to get off a county road and 4x on a ranch road. It's all BLM property where we are. So we're not breaking any laws. So this is the front and back of the piece. And it kind of just shows you, the size.
Yeah.
Well, I had it analyzed with an X-ray spectrometer because I had the last one analyzed back in 2000 or so. And it shows up here that it is an aluminum alloy with all the different elements. You can see aluminum, some silicon, magnesium, manganese, iron, all kinds of cool stuff in here, right? So, okay, this is cool. So now, so I had it analyzed, right? And so I go, okay, I had to lecture on the 4th. I told Frank, I said, I want to go back to the debris site. He goes, can I go? I go, yeah, you're going with me. I said, but this time I bought my own Fisher metal detector because they had his. So I bought my own within the time frame of June and July. We went back out there again, and this time there's a picture of Frank Kimbler and me out there in the debris field, and we were out there with some people from the Roswell Daily Record. There's my truck out there. That's my Ram 2500. You have to have a cool looking truck if you're an investigator. That's just all there is to it.
Definitely.
Yeah, you can't go out there in a Kia. So we found some more pieces, right? And using the Fisher Goldbug Pros, we actually found a half a dozen more pieces out there. Some pieces were 2 to 3 inches in the ground. Some were about 8 inches in the ground.
Okay.
Now let me jump forward again. Let me see. There's that forward. That's backwards. Go this way. My apologies. Yeah. So
no
that's Frank Kibler. These are more pieces. That's the around 2,500 I was telling you about.
That's
awesome. I was expecting you to say, "Hey, that's pretty awesome," but no, you didn't say that, so now I know why.
It is
awesome. You can see it now.
And here's some more. Here's some more of the debris that we found. I apologize for people watching this because you did mention that before the podcast.
Is it rusting there, or is it just dirty?
That's the iron deposits from the soil sitting on it. But once you clean that sucker off, it's clean. It's clean.
Yeah, because I was saying aluminum doesn't rust, so.
Yeah, so let me see. How do I kill it? Stop? No.
There should be like a stop share screen or
something.
There you go.
Okay, so I'm going to go to the next one. Back to share screen again. This is the first time I've used this Riverside, so I apologize.
You're doing
good.
You're
be a pro.
Yeah, right. We'll try this one. Share. See if that pops up.
Yep.
Okay, that was. Let me stop that one again. I'm trying to get to the piece where.
Yeah, if you have multiple tabs open, you got to pick the right one because it'll ask you.
Okay, so this one right here. We'll do it again. I just wanted to make sure I got the right screen. Okay, so the little piece, let me scroll up. So we took the pieces that we found, and here's Frank. There's his Fisher metal detector there, and we're sifting through it. And these are the pieces that he found compared to the penny, and these are the pieces I found with my metal detector compared to the ruler. So then he went to Albuquerque to a lab there. I went to a lab in Denver, and we both did electron scanning microscope analysis on it. Now, the reason why I said it's $250 to $300 an hour because it cost me $600 to have one little piece scanned at the site. So this is what I'm saying, that when people say, "Well, why don't you just do this? Why don't you do that?" I'm going, "Why don't you just give me about $10,000 and I'll be able to do it?"
Right.
But I really don't have a budget for this. I just, if I have some extra money, I'll do it. So it shows the electron scanning microscope there. And then what's really cool is when you zoom in, I don't know if I can get a zoom on this. Yeah, that'll work. You can see a little better now.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is at I think it's like 15 microns, I believe. It's pretty small. So if you look at this, you can see where my cursor is. This is what the piece looks like in submicron. And it's really, really unusual the way that even inside you can see cracks and gouges, and the guys at both places that look at this, the lab here in Denver and the lab in Albuquerque, both said that the piece that we had, or the pieces that we had analyzed, appeared to have came from something that exploded, because the edges were jagged and even melted in some cases. And then as they got in real close, they could see it wasn't smooth. It was all kind of distorted like this. And really unusual. They said they haven't seen anything before. Now, if you look at the colored picture on the right, the different colors of dots is a type of metals that's in that. That tells you it's an aluminum alloy, because you can see all the different colors. Because when you scroll down, the ESM takes each one of the elements and shows you, where they are in that 10 micron or 50, I think it was 10 micron zoom in. And a micron is like 1 times 10 to the minus ninth or something, so it's pretty small. So when you see a picture like this, it shows you it's an alloy. Here, oh yeah, so here's a zoom in of that. So it's 5 microns on this. You can see a little channel here, and it's really bizarre. And both of them said they really haven't seen anything, this unique like that. But the Denver lab that I took it to, they deal with aluminum alloys, and they said if this came from a company, one of my customers, I would have told them by looking at the edges and looking at the internals that whatever it was failed because it destroyed, it exploded. And whatever this was that we found, and it's not one piece, it's a few pieces that look like this, something exploded out there in the middle of the desert, and over the years was buried in the ground. We dug it up, and after it was cleaned, and like you said, all the rust stuff was taken out because that was just the stuff from the minerals from the dirt. That's what you get. And when you clean it, that's how it looks.
Right.
All nice and all nice and shiny. Yeah. This was just some samples he had on his ESM, and then them putting it in the ESM. These machines aren't cheap; they're pretty expensive. The software alone is real expensive because it's it bombards the inside. It's got to be completely sealed. It bombards it with rays and like high frequency radiation rays, and disperses them. And then they have these sensors, depending on the reflection and how it's reflected off the metal, determines the type of minerals that's on the metal. So it's pretty cool. And even these are Frank Kimbler's debris samples, and you can see aluminum, silicon, manganese, and a lot of the stuff that I had on mine. So they're all falling into an aluminum alloy. I'm going to go back here. Okay, so they're all falling into aluminum alloy. Now, Frank, being a geologist, as he is, he's real good at it. He's got a degree in it. He's done some research, and these alloys fall into a 6000 series, and they're not registered because they have the means of plugging in all the elements and to determine. Now, the machine here in Denver and the machine in Albuquerque could not identify the alloy. Now, the ESM will tell you right off, this is an alloy 6000 series, 6500 to whatever number, right? They'll tell you exactly. And then you look up that number, and it's used blah, 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 or it's used here. 3000 series are usually aluminum cans, stuff like that. 6000 series generally now are like beams, a big aluminum beams in like battleships.
Okay.
Bizarre. But nothing ever this thin. Or this light. But still, that's a registered alloy that's being used. These alloys are non-registered. In other words, they're unknowns. Now,
has it ever been somebody tried to recreate that alloy?
Now, here's the interesting thing. You guys Army?
Air Force.
I'm sorry, Air Force. I apologize.
No worries.
I just insulted you. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
It is an acronym.
Will allow it. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure the Army guys are out there going, well, I don't think they've ever gone for a year deployment. Theirs is only 6 months in a hotel somewhere.
That's Zach's in a hotel right now.
Right behind me.
Actually. I'm in a hotel right now on Air Force TDY. So.
As a deputy, I went to every one of the home games because we had to take care of the civilians, the drunk civilians. So I was, for a while there, even though my boys are Army, I was rooting always for the Air Force team because I was one of them. But basically,
you knew better. So
I knew better. Yeah, I knew better until I was standing out in the field. Here I go off on a tangent, but I'm standing out in the field, working the field, and our guys came out going, "Yay, our guys, cheer!" And then the other guys was Brigham Young or something. I forget who it was, but they were giants. And I go, we're going to die.
Yeah.
No, because the Air Force guys, they're, you have to be a certain height, certain weight, certain,
Yeah.
These guys were just gorillas out there. And I'm going, we're going to die. Hope these guys can pull out guns or something to help protect them. But
the jets.
So basically, the elements are non-registered elements. Now, let's see, Lieutenant Colonel Philip Corso. Back in the day, he was under General Trudeau. out of World War II. After the 1947 incident of Roswell, where something came down, crashed, left debris everywhere. This is exactly where we're finding debris.
Mm-hmm.
He was in charge of dispersing unknown objects, artifacts from the Roswell debris site into the industry of the United States. And so it's in his book. It's called The Day After Roswell by Lieutenant Philip Colonel Corso. Highly decorated guy. He was responsible for getting a lot of our guys out of Nam, out of the concentration camps. So highly decorated guy. Not a goof, right? In what I'm trying to say. So he basically said some of the stuff that came from Roswell in 47 was filtered in to the technology or filtered into to the labs of the time, some of them being in a university, some of them being private, like IBM and other places like that. And then they were their objective was to figure out exactly what it was and what it's used for or whatever. And his claim was fiber optics, transistors, and other things, came out of it. So my claim is, if we're finding an aluminum alloy 6000 series out in the middle of the desert under that much dirt, in the middle of the desert, possibly some of it back in 47 was reverse engineered, introduced into our environment, and we're using it today for other things.
This kind of one of the questions I wanted to ask you on your opinion is some of these things like the TikTok or the Tic Tac, right? The Commander Fravor Tic Tac. Do you think how much of this stuff that they have released on video do you think is actual off-world technology being used by off-world beings, or do you think it is reverse engineered technology that we're testing against the best of our military to see how we react and not telling them?
Well, I don't know if we're testing it against, let's say it is our stuff reverse engineered. I don't think that we're testing it against our guys because people are seeing it everywhere. And I think our guys just happen to be in a location where they are or they've been seen, because there actually are cases in history where UFOs have been hovering over nuclear sites and disarming the missiles. And you guys can look that up.
So I was at Malmstrom for almost 8 years. That's a pretty famous story there.
Yeah, so there you are, and people go, oh my God, how can they do that? They hacked the system.
Yeah.
This was before Bluetooth. They had the Bluetooth back then. They were able to get in and do what they wanted to do. It's just technology. There's nothing scary about it, and we'll get there too.
Yeah.
Eventually. Well, we're getting there right now. Screen share, same thing that Rocket or when Iron Man did the Marvel movie, first Iron Man. That's what he did. He did a screen share. Is all he did. Anyway, you're all going off again. So, so basically, I think that some of it could be reverse engineered, but I also think some of it isn't reverse engineered. Now, back in 2016 on July 3rd, my sister Debbie Ziegelmeyer is she's on the board of directors for MUFON, and she's a MUFON state director for Missouri. And so we've both been investigators for a while. So when we lecture together, we like to go out at night when it's a clear night and play with our toys, our night vision stuff. So we drove, I had my truck, and when we drove to an area where an artifact was found called the Roswell Rock, and I did the investigation on that. If you guys anybody wants to look up Roswell Rock, it's pretty cool. But I happened to be in an area where the Roswell Rock was found, and there's supposedly UFO activity. And as soon as I pull up, and it's a completely new moon night. You can see the stars, you can see the Milky Way, you can see everything. So I pull up in my truck just off the side of the 2-lane highway on a dirt road. It's a little county road where a farm ranch is. I kind of pivoted my truck. Matter of fact, I think we're facing east to west. Come to think of it, but so I kind of pivoted my truck that way, and I got out of the truck, and I was going to pull the tailgate down, and we were going to look, just sit on the tailgate and drink coffee and look at the stars. And when I pulled the tailgate down, I saw a flash of light. And my sister goes, "You see that?" And I go, "Yeah." I go, "Well, we get those in Colorado because at our altitude, sometimes meteors come in straight at you. You don't see a tail. You just see,
right.
And I've seen them out here. It's okay. That's no big deal. So we went out. Then we're standing on the side of the truck, and we're looking over the little mountain range where the Roswell rock was found. And I go, sis, you're going to have to really check this out. She's my older sister. And I go, well, she's shorter than me. So anyway.
Older little sister.
Older little sister, yes. And so I said, check it out. I put these new lights on the front of my truck, and they're LED lights. I got a remote control, so if we're like 300 yards away from the truck, and we need to know where the truck is, or we need light, I can just hit the remote control. But now I'm standing about 10 feet away from the truck, and I go, but for some stupid reason, they put a strobe on this. I don't know why. But here, check out the strobe. It's kind of cool. I hit the button on the strobe, and it goes flash, 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 flash. Immediately, about 45 degrees off the horizon, right in front of us to the left, we got two bright flashes responding to our flashes. And bright, 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 like moon bright. Not as big as the moon, not as big as like Jupiter or Venus. Like right now, if you go outside, is it Venus now? I forget. No, Jupiter now. And it's real bright. And it's like, right. I'm looking at my sister, I go, did you just see that? And you couldn't help not by see it because our peripheral vision caught the first because it was so bright and we saw it. So she goes, I think they responded to your lights. I go, you think so? She goes, yeah, try your lights again. So I did the strobe again, and immediately afterwards it was, I'm like, holy crap, I'm communicating with something. I grabbed my night vision binoculars, and I'm looking out there, nothing. I can see stars, but I can't see anything. Okay, I don't see craft out there. I don't see anything. All I can see is stars. And I go, okay. She goes, well, do it again. I go, let's give it 5 minutes. I want to make sure this isn't something strobing out there, anything like that, that's repeating. And we did. We waited a period of time. I hit the lights again, and immediately, wham. I'm like, holy shit. So now we're grabbing shit out of the truck, and, there's something's coming down. I don't know what's going on. These are type of investigations that I do that people tell me happened to them, but not happened to me. And I'm like, holy shit, now we got to, so I got the night vision out there, camera, and I'm shooting the air. I'm looking at nothing. And I'll tell you why in a little bit, but this thing that was talking to us could be the size of a basketball or softball. Could be the same thing that happened to Rancher Miller. Okay. But some people see them small and some people see them the size of a Volkswagen. Core size may only be about that big or even that big. But when they're doing things, the energy can expand and make it look like it's larger. Right. So I'm watching this. I'm like, holy crap. So now I've got the night vision out and we can't find anything out there. And then this is a good story. So sorry about it. So all of a sudden, it was about 15 minutes after that, about 9:30 at night, 9:45 or so. And everything just went silent. And you could hear a pin drop out there. And I'm going, okay, what's going on, Because before you could hear the cows move, you could hear other things move. Now this time, we were about 25 feet away from my truck, my Ram 1500. We're about, about 25 feet away because we were walking down towards where the cows were starting to move and stuff. And I thought maybe something's going on, right? And the lights in my truck went on. Now, I have that. My truck was sensitive where you touch the handle, it turns the lights on inside, and then it turns the parking lights on too. And the lights went on my truck. I'm going, oh, shit. Something's happening here now. Yeah. And I never go anywhere. I had my without a gun, I had my 40 cal Glock 22 on my hip. And I'm looking around and I don't see anything there. I'm looking with my night vision binoculars back at my truck. Is there something walking around my truck? Nothing. It just went on, right? But at the same time they went on, I was getting the little hairs on my arm, so it was a large EM field. Yeah. And of course the lights stayed on. And so I went back to the truck, looked around and opened the door and closed it. And then the lights went out. They didn't go off by themselves. I had opened the door and closed the door and then they went off. Then I walked back over where my sister was. And we were still kind of scanning to see what's going on. Okay, what's going to happen next? And a vehicle drove by. And I saw a truck. She saw a sedan. And we weren't that far away from the highway. We were just off the highway. We saw a vehicle go by. I mean, what the hell? And he slowed down. He was watching us. I'm like, oh, that's just a rancher. He's just curious what we're out here for. He probably saw us flashing the lights. She goes, that's not a truck. That's a car. I'm like, come on, sis. I know that's a truck. I have a truck. That's a truck. She goes, I know what a truck looks like. Blah, blah, blah. Right now we're arguing. Anyway, the vehicle went down about 1/8 of a mile, turned off another road, dirt road, pulled towards us. So they're just to my left and parked. And so I swung my night owl glasses over to that area, and I could see it was like a male figure got out of the vehicle and closed the door and just kind of like looked like he crossed his arms. He was just standing by his vehicle watching us.
Trying to intimidate you.
And I'm going, MIB? No, MIB doesn't necessarily mean they're aliens. MIB can mean exactly like in the movie that they're, they work for the government or whatever. Because this is a very high active area that we happen to be in. Maybe, and I have learned over the years that a lot of the high active areas have some small military facilities nearby monitoring them. That's out here in Colorado too. And so he's just there watching us. And my sister, who is kind of intuitive, she says, it's time to go. I said, you're right. It's time to go. I'm out of here.
Yeah.
And, I don't want to leave, right? And we hop in the truck and off we went. So now I'm wondering, when we first got there, was that flashlight really a meteor coming at me, or was that the beginning of what was going on there? And like I said, this was the area where the Roswell rock was found. This was an area where people have had UFO sightings in the past. So it's an active area, i.e. another Skinwalker ranch area, because they're all over the United States. So, just not Skinwalker. I bet if everybody checks their state, they have their own Skinwalker ranch. They don't have to go to Utah.
Right.
But it's pretty cool. Now, you asked, we'll go back to that question. Do I think it's off-world? I think that was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
totally.
How much of a relationship do you think personally that whatever aliens these are have with like our national government, just to be specific? Do you think that there's some sort of, I don't know, codependent relationship? Or do you think that there's just a, we let you interact with us, but we're going to do what we want sort of thing?
Well, there was a treaty that was signed. I apologize. It wasn't Edwards Air Force Base, or was it? I can't remember. But there was a treaty. Supposedly, there's stories out there, like the Dulce papers with the, that's a whole story about Dulce, New Mexico. So there's a story out there that a treaty was signed between aliens and the acting president at the time at an Air Force base. And the treaty said basically that we trade. You give us technology, we give you people and access to our country and our facilities. Now, when you say give us people, the part of the treaty was, that they wanted, aliens wanted to study the humans. The military wouldn't intervene as long as you don't harm the humans. Now, we do know, and being in the military, that in the history, and even now probably, that the military does use humans and soldiers as guinea pigs.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, clearly during the atomic age, when they had above ground explosions, they had poor Army soldiers sitting out there on lawn chairs, getting blasted by tons and tons of radiation. See how, put these glasses on, they'll protect you.
Right.
No, that wasn't the case, but they didn't know. Now we know. So that was supposedly the treaty. And then supposedly the treaty was broken at one point. And that was when Bob Lazar came into S4 at Area 51, where there was a confrontation between aliens and MPs and scientists, and the aliens won, basically, and the MPs and scientists didn't.
Right.
And they were killed, basically. That's how that story goes. And so they were looking for new scientists, and that's where Bob Lazar comes into the picture. I interviewed Dr. Robert Lear. No, Dr. Lear. Oh, I'm sorry. That's somebody else. The guy from Lear Jets. I guess he is Roger. Yeah. So there's Dr. Lear who does the implants, and there's, I think, Roger Lear. That's Leer. The other one's Lear. And I interviewed him, and he said that he was one of the people that that had brought up Bob Lazar, to the CIA to recommend him for S4. He said he used to fly for the CIA. Anyway, so you have that whole thing too. So it's hard to say. Do you think we're working together still? We could still be working together, and not.
Sure.
Yeah, but they're not telling you and I. They're just doing it on their own. And like you said, I have been contacted. I mentioned this earlier. I had been contacted twice years ago. First off, when we found the metal piece at Roswell, when I first got a cell phone numbers weren't that popular out. My cell phone rings, and it was about this time. I guess it's 10 o'clock your time, isn't it? It was about 9 o'clock, 9:30 my time here in Colorado. Oh no, you're behind. You're before me. So you're 8 o'clock.
Yeah, it's just after 8 o'clock.
Yeah, cool. All right. I got a phone call, and it was a very nice man, male voice. Mr. Zukowski, I understand that you found some material at Roswell. You had it analyzed. Can you explain what you found, what it looks like? I said, what do you want? I'll tell you everything. And I did. We about 15 minutes on the phone. I told him everything. I said, it's on my website too. If you want to check out the website, I'm not hiding anything from anybody. And I can even tell you where it's at. And I told him where it's at. He said, thank you very much. And very polite. Well, go a couple years down the road, I do a rash of animal mutilation investigations, cattle mutilations here. I forget if it was 2009, I think it was, somewhere around there. There was just, God, I don't know what was happening, but it was just crazy.
Yeah.
And another 9:30 or so at night, my cell phone rings and I get a call, and it's a very nice, polite gentleman. I can't tell if it's the same guy. This is years later, asking me questions about mutilations. What do you think they are? What happens? How are they doing it? And I answered all the questions, and he said, thank you very much. And I said, if you have any more questions, feel free to call. So, was I talking to someone within the government? Or was I talking to people from the Pentagon that was funding Robert Bigelow? At the time, I didn't know that. I just thought I was talking to someone within the government. Now I seem to think that maybe there'd be two entities. One that now we know of, which is the Pentagon, that's been going on for a while, and there's still another one, embedded within that one that actually, like you said, kind of knows what's going on and how to track things, but hasn't told our fighter pilots yet.
Do these numbers pop up where you could see the numbers, or do they just show up as like unknown or something like that?
I kind of don't remember. It was like no caller ID, I think, at the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the number was masked to you.
Yeah, it was masked. But nowadays, you can go to sites, you buy a card, or you can call your friend up.
Definitely.
And use your friend's dead mom's cell phone number and freak them out or something. I mean, it's kind of crazy now. They're trying to keep that technology-wise. I think it's kind of harder now with the iPhones. Some of the cheaper phones, they can do that still too.
So what would you say is probably the highest level of like sea level encounters that you've had personally? You get what I'm trying to say. What's it? There's different levels, right? So close encounters, first kind, second kind, third kind. I'm definitely not as knowledgeable as you, which is why we reached out, right? But what would you say has been the most significant personal experience you've had doing this throughout your I'm
Okay, well, I can tell you one, and we're going to go back into that dimensional, because I'm very analytical, and so the dimension things is I've seen in the past where people, it's just an easy, solution to say, oh, it's dimensional, or well, not necessarily. It's other things too. It could be, like you said, speed, cloaking devices, and whatever. No, seriously, I mean, I've been in cases where, the light, right? I just talked about that scenario, place over in San Luis Obispo. There was a Bigfoot investigation we're doing, and it turned out to be a UFO investigation or UFO sighting, and there were flashes of light. The batteries in my cameras drained, and shit hit the fan then. And then I could hear something screaming in the background, like an elk running for its life, and then all of a sudden just died. That was the first chapter in the book of 37 Parallel. And then And then I seen a craft. We were on vacation coming from, I forget where it was, but we were in Kansas. No, we were in Kansas, coming into Colorado early in the morning. Early in the morning, everybody's asleep in the RV. It was my in-laws' RV. I'm driving, and I see a metallic craft from behind a hill, barrel roll up and go into the clouds, and I'm going, skunkworks, I bet. Because it looked like it was more terrestrial than extraterrestrial because of the barrel roll and leveling off the clouds to be hidden, right?
Right. Then
at other times it's just balls of light I've seen. And then I've experienced things too, like I said, with that, seeing the phantoms and stuff. Okay, so now the scariest part. So I guess, I don't know, 24, 25, we've been here 24 years, about 26 years, I guess, ago. Through this whole remote viewing. You guys are familiar with remote viewing? Okay, so there was even a movie. Was it with Clooney, was it?
Oh, the Men
Who Stare Goats?
Stare Goats.
Yeah, so the movie that Men Who Stare Goats is based actually on a project that the military had on remote viewing, and they probably still have it. And people claim they can remote view. So I go, and they said anybody can do it. So I go, you know what? I'm going to practice this. Bad decision.
Give it a shot.
Bad decision. Don't go out of your realm of expertise, because now I'm drifting into more of a, I don't want to say spiritual,
metaphysical,
but metaphysical, I guess. But so real quick, the training that I was doing was, you lay in bed, and before you're in that realm, but you're not in the realm, you're still aware of your surroundings, and you look at a movie screen theater. It's an inside theater. You look at the screen and you visualize the screen. And you do this every night, right? For like a period of 3-4 weeks or whatever. And you visualize the screen, and each night you visualize more details. This curtains, the top of the curtains, and then you visualize more detail, the pattern of the curtains, and on and on and on and on. And then when you get to the point where you can see the seats sitting in front, so now you're visualizing everything just really clear, like you're looking at a picture. When you get there, you're past the first step. The second step is to put a red apple, or put a red apple in the screen.
Okay.
The white screen. So now you're looking at everything before, and you put an apple on the screen, and you're visualizing the apple, the stem, everything, all the the little dots on the apple. The third step, once you get to that point, now is going into the third step. The third step is to rotate that apple.
Okay.
So you visualize, now you're including a three-dimensional. And I started to rotate the apple. I looked up, and there was a shadow figure in my doorway staring at me.
Oh my God!
It gives me goosebumps right now. I swear to God, on the Bible, I will take a polygraph. If anybody wants to pay for the polygraph, I won't. But I saw this thing staring at me, and it was a cloaked figure. It kind of reminded me of of the old spaghetti western days with the long, the jacket and the kind of it had it like a brim hat and the whole bit. Maybe that's how I experienced it. But
yeah, I was going to say Hatman.
He looked like, well, I didn't know that back then.
Yeah.
We didn't have that back then. So now people have seen him, Hatman.
Yeah,
and I didn't know that until I got involved in ghost investigations. And I was at one of the ghost investigation, one of their lectures, a symposium out here, and one guy was talking about the different types of people that ghost investigators have seen. They've seen this spirit, they've seen this one, and then this guy, we don't know who he is, but they call him Hatman. I'm like, oh my God, I saw him years ago, and I always thought I made it up. I thought it was just my mind going crazy, but he was staring me down, and I could see detail, but not a lot. It was like a shadow detail along his face and his jawline. I could see, almost like LiDAR. You guys have played with LiDAR? That's a project I'm working on right now, is the optics for a LiDAR system for the military. Maybe, but it's commercial use right now. But the thing is, I could see like, it was like LiDAR, except it was all shadow. And he was just staring me down. And my heart was probably a whole bit like that, and he just went, and it's gone. And I said, I'm not going to ever do that again for the rest of my life.
I wonder if you were like
That's
opening yourself up.
Yeah, that's when I realized that, there's some people, maybe my metabolism, maybe my, my frequency, I'm not that intuitive. My sister's intuitive. She's seen shadow people. She's seen spirits. I haven't,
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very analytical. So I'm very, I don't want to say closed-minded, but I look at details and data and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so it totally just flipped me out. And even to this day,
that's wild.
I mean, if I saw an alien, that'd be the only thing that would probably, remind me or make me forget about this other guy over here, the Hatman guy. God, that what I'm talking about right now, is just kind of a scary thing to remember.
Yeah.
The like main theory of Hatman is that he's like interdimensional, or like he's like a gatekeeper kind of, where he's like gaining knowledge from our dimension or something, and he's like taking it back. Like that's the idea apparently. So
That's
maybe he noticed you, and he like you've been doing it for like a couple weeks, so you're kind of like maybe you're like a light blinking, and he's like, someone's trying to come through, and he comes up to you like, stop it, and then he like leaves.
Once I got the apple to start to move, that was when I was opening the door.
Right.
See, I was afraid that it was like a Grim Reaper, or something.
Right.
I don't know. I have no idea. But, you have to, when you're an investigator, you have to think of, you can't leave anything out. Everything's on the table. Mm-hmm. Some people go, well, that's just stupid. Well, not really, because if you ever sit down at a table in an office and okay, you brainstorm ideas, every idea goes on the table, no matter how stupid it sounds. Mm-hmm. And sometimes the ones that sound the most stupid are the ones that are the best.
Yeah.
There's flashes of creativity that people are throwing. So that's the same thing in ufology. Everything's on the table. Same thing with me with religion. I tend not to stay with one religion or the other. Everything's kind of open because I don't know. What if I mess up and I'm on the wrong religion? I don't know. Mm-hmm. I can tell you that I know for a fact that from doing ghost investigations that I've communicated with life after death. I've got responses back and forth, and I've seen the shadow figures and stuff. So I feel a little more comfortable now about life after death or dying because I think maybe our energy does move. Yeah, it just kind of moves on. But that pretty much scared the hell out of me.
That would scare the hell out of me.
I even see Bigfoot footprints in Bailey, Colorado, and when I was doing some Bigfoot investigations too, because we've had UFO sightings with Bigfoot sightings, and I thought it was just cool. Well, look at that, 18-inch and 19-inch footprints. That's pretty cool. Never thinking this thing could be 9 feet tall, 600 pounds,
watching you,
and rip the arms right off.
Yeah.
Coming around the corner.
Yeah, so pretty cool stuff. I mean, I've been doing this for such a long time. A lot of investigators have a tendency of staying on one subject. Mm-hmm. And I'm just kind of like it all.
You're like a Renaissance
so that's
man.
why I kind of ventured out to UFOs, animal mutilations, and then Bigfoot and ghosts, and then I'm finding out that it all has one common denominator too, and that's electromagnetic fields. Mm-hmm. But you don't know that unless you do them all. Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So and then I was talking about how can you find a Skinwalker Ranch, near you, or so what you basically do is based on my latest theories is you look across the U.S. or you look across your own state or whatever where there might be high levels of UFO activity. Okay, just where there's been a few sightings. Then you look at that place and then you look underground. Mm-hmm. Is there a water source nearby? Is there a lake? Is there is there an aquifer? And then if not, then you look to see if there's petroleum. Mm-hmm. Because if there's petroleum products like, crude oil, even, gas, right? You can extract hydrogen from crude oil from fossil fuels. You can extract hydrogen. During the high extraction period, you'll pick up high levels of EMF. Mm. So what you do is if you pick those areas that have the little bit higher UFO sightings, if they have underground aquifers, well, aquifer by definition is underground, but aquifers or lakes or crude oil or deposits, go to that area, sweep different parts of that area with an EMF meter. You start picking up high levels of EMF, you got a Skinwalker Ranch there. Yeah, and that's what I've done a couple of times, and it's worked out so far.
Man.
Not every place in the U.S. I mean, I just live in Colorado, so.
Right. So what's the significance then for people listening of the 37th parallel that makes it so different than any other place along that line?
We have, as humans, we have highways that we go on.
Mm-hmm.
Interstate 40 and 70, Highway 66,
Mm-hmm.
So we have our own turnpikes. Well, it turns out that on the 37th parallel, a little bit into 38th, a little bit down to the 36th, you can hit every aquifer under the, in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
Not only that, there's a lot of underground caverns too, but there's a water source that shoots across the top. Then you start looking at that, and you say, okay, so what else is kind of significant on the 37th parallel that may make it sound pretty cool? Well, Dulce, New Mexico, the Dulce base, which is an supposed alien human base. Then you have Taos, New Mexico, which was the Taos Hum. Then you have Area 51 is on the 37th. Then you have places in Virginia, and then you have the Mantell incident or something. Anyway, you have a lot of major UFO events that happened. And then there's some Native American spiritual sites too. Chaco Canyon's off a little bit, but there's, Aztec and a few also in that. So there was just a lot going on when I started researching it, and realized, and what it hit me was when we had a cattle mutilation on the 37th parallel in Trinidad, which is the 37th parallel. We had a cattle mutilation there in 3 days. We had a cattle mutilation exactly on the 37th parallel in Missouri.
Wow.
Joplin spook lights on the 37th parallel within 3 days. Now, cattle mutilations, they don't happen singular. They happen either twos or threes. And it could be two or threes happening at one place, or it could be two or threes happening in different states, but they all happen within about a week of each other.
Right.
So it's pretty cool.
The entirety of the cattle mutilation thing has always been incredibly interesting to me because I don't really understand why. And that's the biggest thing that intrigues me, right? You talk about UFOs, you talk about people being abducted, people visiting, and if you look at us like an anthill, right? We're being observed and you inspect and, it's everything that you watch a little kid messing around with an anthill does. Try to pick up the ants, watch them, kick the anthill over, all this stuff. If we're the anthill to these, these beings that are, maybe so much more advanced and smarter than we are. But the one that just doesn't make sense to me, like what the purpose of this is. You're going to a herd. You're taking a cow away. You're exsanguinating it. You're removing these seemingly insignificant pieces from it. Obviously an udder is significant to the cow, but why? So in this process you've
gently putting it back.
Gently putting it back. And why cattle? What is it what's the purpose of exsanguinating an animal? What's in, you would think if you're going through that process to take the blood, you have a need for it. But we don't know that. I can't know that answer. And that's one of the biggest things that makes that so scary. And to me, like, I've been asked this question before, what terrifies you more? Something like demonic possession or alien abduction? And I guess, like, for me, I would say alien abduction, because there's that sense of autonomy you have as a human being that, you're your person, you're here on planet Earth, right? You could get hit by a car tomorrow or get murdered or things like that. But if you're taken off this planet, like, there's no recourse for that. You can't get back. You're gone. You have no idea what's happening to you. These stories like Travis Walton, that is absolutely terrifying. It ruined this guy's life, these experiences, and how many people have disappeared and you'll never hear from them again, So what's the purpose?
Ruined his marriage too.
Right. For sure. All these terrible things happen to him in this experience. And if you've ever seen, and I'm sure you have, Chuck, but like anybody listening, seen that movie Fire in the Sky, that's one of the scariest movies to me. Like, that's amazing. That's awesome. But just watching that movie, like those scenes are terrible. I couldn't even imagine going through that.
They are. I mean, I've lectured with Travis in the past couple of times, and we've sat down and talked about it. And I asked him, when they fixed you, have you ever been really sick since then? Because what was it, 75 or 76, somewhere around there? And he says, no, I've never really. It'd be interesting now to see whether or not he caught COVID and But
I was
because
just
I
thinking
joked with
that.
her back then, they fixed you pretty good. Like they tweaked your immune system or something.
Mm-hmm.
But he's the only guy that I know that have seen two separate species. He's seen the grays, and he's seen the tall. What do we call them? The Nordics, or the tall blondes, or the giants. They have different names. Yeah, because when he was in the craft, he woke up and there was this thing apparatus over his chest.
Mm-hmm.
He said, "Oh, these little grays are like looking at him." He was
Mm-hmm.
like 19 at the time. He jumps into his Bruce Lee karate moves.
Yeah.
Never studied karate before in his life, but that's the first thing you think of.
Mm-hmm.
And these little guys take off running, right? And then he goes to leave the little room that he's in, and he's a tall guy. I think he's 6'4" too, somewhere around 6'4".
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, he's pretty tall. I have to look up to him when I talk to him, and I'm 5'10". So when he left the room, the corridors in the craft were really narrow, and it was hitting his shoulders.
Okay.
Really narrow, and it curves so much that he couldn't see what was around the corner. And so he's in a panic mode trying to get out of there, and even more because it's sort of claustrophobic, and he goes into this one room that looks like the star room or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then what appears to be an astronaut, he thought, a human came in to escort him out of there. When they took the helmet piece they had on, they were very, very light complected with dark blue eyes, offset a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Really, and that's the other beings that our Native Americans have talked about.
Right.
I've talked to Apache and I've talked to Navajo elders,
Mm-hmm.
and they always mention like 4 species of aliens or 4 species of things. 5, you want to count us, Homo sapiens. But then you have the blues. Except that the blues are what we call leprechauns, Tommyknockers, Menahunis. I actually wrote a blog about that, and people are still seeing all 3. We were in Hawaii during COVID. I actually talked to someone on the Big Island, and they still have Menahuni sightings there. I was in Ireland last year. Turns out you can use your passport for other than a cruise. So,
good to know.
For the same price,
Right.
So I told my wife, "Let's just go to Ireland." Okay. So, and then I talked to some people, and people way out. We were on trips, tour trips, and just normal people that were living in the villages, and asked them about leprechauns. And you don't want to talk to me, they don't like to be talked about. And I'm like, whoa, they're serious about this stuff, And Tommyknockers too, in mines. Then you have the ant people. Now so the blues come out of the mountains from what the Native Americans. The ant people come out of the ground. That's why they're called ant people. But they're grays. Now they're not called ant people because of their eyes. They're called ant people because they come out of the ground. Now we don't know whether or not that's actually an eyelid or an eyepiece over their eyes. That goes back to Roswell, where their eyes are similar to ours, and they just have these, organic covering,
Right.
like a eyelid, always closed that you could see through. It's probably the best way because they work in dark areas, I guess. I don't know. There's a lot of theories on that. Anyway, so that's the ant people. Then you have the snake people, which turned out to be reptilians. Now the reptilians are the bad guys. They're the ones that order the grays around, or the ant people around. They leave the blues alone because the blues will kick their ass.
Okay.
You don't want a leprechaun mad at you.
Right.
They'll take you.
Steals Lucky Charms.
Yeah, exactly. So it was funny because I asked one of the Native Americans about that, and they said, "Oh no, they don't mess with the blues. We don't mess with the blues either, because they're badass." And then they had what they call the giants, which we call the Nordics, or the tall blondes and stuff. And the tall blondes are the ones they all have, except for the blues, they have a permanent residence here. The other guys have like townhomes. They come visit from now and then. And the tall blondes kind of keep. They're like the Starfleet, where they try to keep everybody in check and don't mess up, don't mess things up. And that's the stories. With Alien Highway, we're over by the Skinwalker Ranch, and I was to interview a Ute elder on camera, and we just have so much stuff going on there outside of Skinwalker Ranch that we filled up. We could have done 2 episodes.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, we were going to do a second episode if we had a second season because we had so much material and we didn't get it. So I was talking to him, prepping him to be on camera. And I said, yeah, so the Ute American tribes, I've talked with Navajo, Apache, and they have their own names for Bigfoot, Sasquatch. And he goes, yeah, our name is, and I forgot, blah, blah, blah. And I said, and the Star Travelers, oh yeah, our name is, yeah, of course, and they're all about that. And I said, the Greys are really fascinating me. And he goes, oh, you mean that, da-da-da. And he told me the Ute name for a gray alien.
Okay.
I've never heard of that. I've never heard of that before.
Me neither.
I've heard Star Travelers. I've heard, visitors, blah, blah, whatever, different names from the different tribes. But I've never heard an actual Native American name for a gray alien.
Do you remember what it was?
Oh no, I was in shock when I heard it. But it was a Ute, so it wasn't anything. The whole reason of Skinwalker, and it's hard to pronounce some of these names like Yinalushi. That's Navajo for Skinwalker. Yinalushi is a Skinwalker. Skinwalker is our name for Yinalushi. So the Utes were trading. They were fighting the Navajos for Colorado. They already had Utah. And then so they would kill off the Braves, and then they would capture the women and the children. They would sell the women and the children. Sorry, guys, but this is history. Yeah. They would sell the women and the children to the Spaniards. So they introduced slavery to the country way before the Europeans migrated here, because they were trading slaves for horses and guns, and they became really, really good at shooting guns on horseback. And they were kicking the Navajos' ass left and right and driving them out of Colorado. You can read all this stuff if you're ever in Colorado or Utah. It's part of our history here.
I'll be there at the beginning of November.
Oh, cool. So the Navajo, their only defense was to curse the Ute tribe with the Skinwalker. So they cursed him with Yinalushi. So even when I mentioned the word Skinwalker, he stopped me and said, don't mention the word around me. Just say that thing or whatever, and never Yinalushi, because you're inviting them. So even now, the 21st century, talking to a Native American elder Ute, very respectful of the Skinwalker.
This isn't just myth to them.
It's not myth to them.
Earlier, when you were talking, I felt like you may have had an experience of your own with something like that, shapeshifter, Skinwalker sort of thing, cryptid, whatever you want to call it. Did I pick up on that, or am I?
Well, yes and no. I mean, I've done a few investigations. Not a whole lot, just a few on skinwalkers or shapeshifters. And one time in Missouri, it was over by Marley Woods, Missouri.
Okay.
And that's where I actually filmed a ball of light. I saw what I thought could have been. I mean, it was kind of like one of these eerie feelings, and you see the shadow go by and stuff, and then you see something run off, and I can't tell you that was a case, but it kind of reminded me of the investigations of the skinwalkers out here in Colorado. Right before COVID hit, my daughter and I, we did an investigation near Cripple Creek, Colorado, and a guy was living off the grid. 4 of his goats, one was killed. No, 3 of his goats was killed. 1 was taken. 1 survived. And it was just a strange animal death. When he got there, they had puncture marks on the side of their neck.
It's like the chupacabra thing, right?
I always thought that was a joke.
Yeah. I think when the first time I heard about the chupacabra was probably I was a teenager, and it did at first sounds like just some sort of myth, but the more I've gotten older, the more I have sort of cemented my belief system that these things are real, whether they exist and they're just really, really good at hiding, or like you said, the easy explanation of they're interdimensional or whatever. I do. Yeah. I think that they exist, and call me crazy, whatever. I don't care. It's just my belief systems, that I do. I think that those are legitimate. And I think that they get discounted because they come from groups of people who have less of a voice. I feel like,
I think so. I mean, you can't deny physical evidence. And I mean, somewhere on my website, because I wrote a blog on it, there's actually pictures of the dead goats with the blood on the neck.
That's crazy.
And the one that's
Are they exsanguinated also? maybe not to the same degree, or
I think I don't know if they were drained of blood completely or died due to
loss,
the bite mark, but one was taken, and part of the fence was the wire fence was bent down where whatever took it hopped the fence and took it back. Saber-toothed tiger, I don't know, but
yeah.
But and I picked up high EMF on that fence right where that happened. But I later learned that that if you take metal, that's been that way forever, and you alter it, you're altering the electrons and protons, so you can create a little bit of an EM field because you're altering something that's been sitting one way and now you alter the other.
So you sort of recreate that.
You just have to think about that type of stuff. So, but him and his neighbor, I've asked if they've seen anything else unusual, and they've both had seen shadow people, similar to the one that I've seen, where they don't walk; they kind of like whoa, scary.
It's so crazy.
Trevor's thinking about it. Yeah, it's kind of scary looking.
It's so crazy how much of these things just sort of tie together. You know what I mean? Because before I started having these conversations with people like you, I used to think that like these all just kind of existed. Shadow people were in the paranormal haunting realm, and then I started realizing that it's not. It exists in this other space as well. So it's just kind of wild just how much there is this overlap, and I've talked to other people and they're talking about like having this unified theory of understanding of like what all this is. And it's really intriguing to me that maybe just we can't see all this other stuff is there. Like, animals can't pick up on certain colors on the spectrum, but we can, that maybe there's just so much going on around us all the time. We just can't see it because of our eyes. It's kind of like what we had.
I think the main thing with like Bigfoot, people ask me, well, how come Bigfoot hasn't been found yet? Well, because A, they haven't been introduced to technology. B, their eyes are heightened, their hearing is heightened because they haven't been introduced to technology.
Yeah.
Where people like me have tinnitus from, playing guitar. You can't see it in the background.
You can see the neck of it.
And then I read a study a few years ago that the human eye can actually see infrared. And they were doing a study with subjects, and the majority of subjects, they would flash a light. They would flash a infrared light, and the eyes, majority of their test subjects, not all of them, the eyes would twitch a little bit. So the eye was actually responding to what the light was doing to it, but the brain wasn't. So people were going, I don't see a thing. But when they were looking at their eyes were like, drink, so the eyes
probably
are
similar to how like your brain, like your nose is right here in your brain at all times. Your brain ignores it.
Yeah, now I can see my nose. Thanks for that.
I'm very aware.
But that's the case, though, because as we get more and more introduced to technology, our brain will actually take over and eliminate things that we don't need. And I'm sure you've seen the studies where you'll see a sentence and every third word is misspelled, but because it's a common word, we just read it.
Yeah.
The fox took over, but if you read each word, it's misspelled. But yet we look at the word going, well, that's what it means. That's because our brain has decided, okay, we don't need to be that detailed. I'll just figure it out for you. Well, that's what's happened. Now, Bigfoot, on the other hand, okay, his eyes or their eyes can probably still see infrared. That's why they see infrared flashes from the game cameras. Right.
Makes sense.
And if their hearing is good, then they can hear the pitches when now I got to tell you this. So I set some cameras out when I did a couple of Bigfoot investigations. They're Moultrie cameras, so they're good game cameras, not the cheap ones. And after a week, I was getting pictures of deer actually posing in the camera. They would look for the picture and went, what the hell? So I called up technical support at Moultrie, and I said, so what's going on? And he goes, well, these cameras have got, their infrared or their sonar, right? And the infrared is basically for the light, and the sonar is to snap the picture or to start the video. And a sonar is at a certain beam, just like on a submarine. And if it hits something and bounces back, it twitches, it changes, and they hear that.
The deer's picking it up and looking at it like, what's that? And
they can pick it up and look at it,
Hearing the headlights.
And I'm going, okay, well, now maybe Bigfoot's doing the same thing. I mean, even cows.
Avoiding it, yeah.
I actually had cows, look over at a game camera, but cows are very in tune to the environment, so it kind of makes sense. So Bigfoot,
Cows are
if
way
he's
more
out there,
intelligent than we say they are.
yeah, well, yeah. Sheep, on the other hand, are kind of stupid, but cows are.
Yeah.
But
Cows will remember people. They know their names. They're
yeah, they're
like
puppy
on
dogs.
the same. Yeah, they're like dogs. They're pretty smart.
Sheep just during a ground fire, they'll just huddle up,
right,
and die together
and die right there. Yeah,
yeah.
or they'll go to the fence and they stop. They don't realize the fence goes both ways. They just go to the end and go, okay, this is it. As far as we can go, we're going to die. Well, if you just go left, there's a road there, and you can leave. But the cow will go to the fence and they'll walk the fence. And you're right though. But so Bigfoot, they're very in tune to their environment. They can tell when the environment changes. Now, here's one for you, and I know you guys are going to agree with me on this. Okay. We all have ESP. Yes. Do we go? Okay, maybe.
Yeah,
Okay,
I think so.
All right. But now some people out there going, no, that's stupid. We don't have it. Okay, so you've heard of women's intuition, and that does work.
For sure.
If you're with a person, I don't want to be sexist, but that's what they used to call it, women's intuition. Now it's just a person who is intuitive. But back in the day, it was called women's intuition. If you're with the wife or your mom or whoever, girlfriend, and they just had this feeling, it's not right. Let's get out of here. Okay, that's a form of ESP. Now we call that being intuitive. So if you're ever sitting in your car or you're at a restaurant and you just feel like someone's staring at you, but you're out of your peripheral vision and you turn around and sure enough, what is that? How did we know we're being stared at? That's a form of ESP. Now some people it's more in tune than us, than others, but it all goes back down to that frequencies again, where you're not actually seeing them, you're picking up that energy.
I think it kind of goes. You're talking about how technology's made us some of our senses get less. I think that's just an old, we're still animals on this planet. We're still had to run from things and fight for things. So I think it's just an old animal instinct that still kind of triggers in people. And they're just what the heck is that?
Yeah, it still exists.
Yeah.
Still in our little monkey brains.
Why fire seems to mesmerize everybody, why people generally seem to have a fear of the dark. All these things. Predators come out at night. Fire is safety.
Who's ever jumped over a bonfire? Come on.
Yeah, I have not.
Bonfires on the beaches when I was a kid, and we would run and jump over them.
Yeah,
that's a primal thing. And it's stupidity at the worst. To jump over a fire.
Sure.
Now that you have a camera, people can catch that. But back in the day, no one knew about it because no one would film it.
Sure.
But you're right. And then it's really sad, too, that I read a study just the other day. I forget what university it came out of, but this says that the newer generations, younger generations, the IQ seems to be dropping a little. And I think, and it's not that people can be smart and have a low IQ. Listen, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, IQ in particular. And I seem to think it because we're becoming too dependent on technology. For back in the day, we used to go to the library and we would look up stuff in books and we would read. Now we say, hey, Alexa, hey, Google, and we're becoming very, if you ever watch Wall-E, right, the Disney movie, where they're all just big fat people sitting
floating
there.
Chairs.
That's how we're headed. Especially here in the U.S., we have one of the heaviest populations in the world.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's true though. But I've been Googling stuff you've been saying. I've been it's interesting, and I'll Google it off to the side and save it so I can look it up later. I'm doing the same thing.
But that was funny too because I've learned that from lecturing. I got to get all my eggs in a row when I lecture, or ducks in a row if you want. While I was lecturing, somebody was in the audience actually checking me to see if I was saying was correct. And then when it came time for answering, he says, when you said that da-da-da and da-da-da was in the early 30s and 40s, I didn't believe it. But yeah, sure enough, it was. I looked it up and I'm going, oh no.
Instant access.
Yeah, I better be really careful. So that's why I always do PowerPoint presentations, because I leave all the data on my PowerPoint.
Right.
And then make it easy for people. And even on my website, so anytime any one of my posts on UFOnut.com, any information I get, I always have the link there. And the links are at the bottom. Unless it's really important, I'll put the link right where I try not to put the link right in the middle of the blog because people might link to it and not come back to the blog. So I'm going to make them read the whole blog first. Some people now, like when I released the analysis of that piece of metal, saying it's aluminum alloy not registered. It's in the blog. It's a press release. I got this this thing on Facebook. Guy messaged me. Goes, well, not that I don't believe you, but can you send me the lab, elements of the lab report? And I'm like, well, if you read my blog, they're listed in the blog, the actual sheet which I took of it. In other words, you were too damn lazy even to read the blog.
Right.
You got as far as the title and maybe the first paragraph, and then you ended it and you made all your assumptions. And that's what we're seeing right now with a lot of things.
Sure.
People are jumping to conclusions without actually, well, we've always jumped to conclusions, but nowadays without actually knowing what's going on, people are assessing, oh, this is what it is. And you can't do that, And so, like you guys said, when you look at the paranormal, everything is connected. But it took me 35 years to figure that out. Well, 30 years, last 5 years, I've been figuring out more and more that there's all a connection. And we're all, all things are kind of connected. The one thing I see a connection is electromagnetic fields is energy. But, I'm sure there's other connections I haven't found yet, of course.
Brandon said in previous episodes that if the ghost hunters and the UFO hunters and the Bigfoot hunters, if they all just decided to come together, they'd probably solve it all. But they're all still kind of separated, so they'll never figure it out.
Well, that was one of the things we were trying to handle with Alien Highway. Is one of the people on my team was a ghost hunter, but that's what I wanted. That's what I was actually pitching a couple of years ago. Was a team that you had a cryptozoologist, you had a psychic, because I'm not knocking psychics because I've seen seen people that can call it, but then I've also seen people who say they can call it that they don't. Like at a Comic-Con, I mentioned briefly there was a psychic there, and psychic for the stars or whatever she was. And I briefly mentioned that, and I was setting her up. And I briefly mentioned that, my grandfather and I were really close. And, and every now and then I think of him. She goes, well, I can see him. He's behind you. He's behind you. He stays, and I'm like, I've never met my grandfather. He died before my mom even married my dad, so I mean, he doesn't even know we even existed.
Right.
So you get people like that, that
right.
But there's the other people that just kind of scare you. Like, the two Native American elders that I was talking to, they're spiritualists, are the ones that told me about the aliens, about the grays, the blues and the stuff. Each one of them, and I met them a couple of different years apart, one Apache, one Navajo. And it scares me because they walked up to me and I'd be just watching, and we're lecturing all together somewhere. And it's almost like they just kind of look and kind of walk over to me. And I'm just in a crowd just watching them. It's not like I'm asking me, hey, come here. And they go, you're different. And what do you mean? He goes, I don't know, there's something about you. But I have to meet you because there's something about you. And I'm going, okay, well, that was the first one. And that was Stella Wolf, who was, she was Apache. And then the next one, I forgot her name, was Navajo. She was from Navajo. She's the same damn thing. And it was a couple years later.
That's wild.
And I'm like, what in the hell is going on?
Yeah. Well, I feel like you definitely...
They didn't know who I was. And I knew who they were.
You had the right frequency, the right vibe.
That's what I'm thinking. Maybe I just have that right frequency for that people can pick up on some cases. Other, not. But, like I said, we all have that frequency, which goes back to abductees now. So remember, originally, people were saying that, the implants had to do with being able to track you and find you. And I never bought into that because when I was talking to Dr. Lear, the other one, Lear, who is the podiatrist, who's taking out, sometimes when he would take a implant out in his office, some of his machines would go wacky.
Yeah.
The instruments, lights, they would do weird things, the lights would flicker and shit. So I knew it was an energy source, and as an energy source, I'm figuring it's collecting data. And so I always figured that's what it's there for, just kind of collecting data on what the body's doing and what it, whatever. And that's what we do with bears, pretty much, or we'll put devices on them and stuff. And then it wasn't until later on I started realizing more about frequencies in our bodies and stuff. So you guys have probably, I know you've played with FLIR devices. So you can take a FLIR device, and I'm not quite sure because I've never played with a military one. But if you want to look for a specific temperature, depending on the FLIR, you can dial that temperature in and you say, I want to look for something at 103 degrees or 101. Only that will light up, correct?
Pretty much.
So it'd be pretty much if someone was in a military helicopter, and if they wanted to abduct or they wanted to steal a cow mutilated, maybe they were looking for a cow that was sick. It'd be really easy to flash a FLIR down, look at all the animals. The one that lit up was the one they had set at 101 degrees or 95, whatever cows' temperatures are. In other words, the one that's sick. They find real simple, single that one out, take it. Okay. Same with aliens. So if we're all separate frequencies, they can have the technology that if they abduct you one time, that they've captured your frequency. They have your frequency now. It's downloaded. It's saved. Anytime they want to find you, they just look for you. And out of the millions of people, they find that one red dot walking around. Me, I'd be walking around in circles, but they go, oh, okay, we know where you are. Come get you. It's just technology. It's not anything else. We do give off a frequency. Once we figure out how we can, identify the frequencies, I'm sure the NSA can use it to track people born.
The
born guy, they could probably track him.
God, it's Jason Bourne.
The military used frequencies off like phones and other electromagnets to 3D scan rooms and homes and stuff. And they actually used that when we went to go capture/kill Osama bin Laden. They had the whole scan of like that facility because of the devices that were in there and pinging them off other things.
Well, yeah, and I used that example as we're human and we're not perfect. Because I've got a lot of people tell me, oh, it's the military doing the animal mutilations. Really, because we've had over 10,000 cases here. And out of the 10,000 cases that were investigated by law enforcement, there's been no evidence of human or predator on an actual. So you think one time a human would screw up and leave evidence since what are we looking at, 67, 68, whatever, when, Snippy the horse was 67, I think. And I said, example, what was a SEAL Team 6 went after bin Laden, crashed a helicopter in the compound. That's a shitload of evidence. So here's the best of the best that we have, the best technology, which was a stealth helicopter that most people didn't know we had.
Still doesn't exist.
It still doesn't exist. But yet technology, didn't work right as technology is, because I know that technology doesn't work right.
Sure.
Because we're constantly fixing it. And so this was a big event for us. And we stand, our guys are good enough that we still accomplished the mission. We had backup, everything, because everything's worked out. But yet, man, we left a shitload of evidence. So you think since 1967, out of all the mutilation cases, there would have been one footprint. One car tire print.
Right.
Something.
Right.
Something. But it's zero.
Yeah.
And that's what's scary.
Have you ever come to any sort of conclusion in what you've done as to why this happens?
When I first started researching it, I learned that during World War II, that our military was looking at bovine hemoglobin to use as for blood transfusions on the battlefield, because bovine hemoglobin is very compatible with human blood. It doesn't need to be refrigerated. I read an article somewhere, I can't find it now, but because it's been a few years ago when I was reading, all this up, trying to figure it out myself. And I think during Vietnam, the Vietnamese might have actually used bovine hemoglobin because they didn't have a Red Cross. We had a Red Cross. Now, you can research this, that when we first started doing in vitro fertilization, right, on women, they were testing bovine hemoglobin to incubate, the egg.
Mm-hmm.
And then the medical industry stepped in and says, no, you're not going to use cow blood to make humans. So don't do that until we perfect a system where you can use human, hemoglobin. But you can look it up. They were getting really, really good results with bovine hemoglobin. So that tells us that bovine hemoglobin is very compatible to humans. So if you wanted to make an alien hybrid from a human, you would use bovine hemoglobin. Now, what about horses and dogs and rabbits and hogs that are getting mutilated too? So now is the blood being used also as consumption? That was another thing. That's what they were saying was happening in Gulfing. They were saying that the blood was being used, the aliens were consuming the blood via osmosis. Is that correct? Sucking it up through their skin.
Yeah, osmosis is water passing through the cellular wall barrier. Yeah.
So they would kind of like bathe in it. That was the whole Dulcie Papers thing.
Jeez.
That they would. That's how they would because when I was talking to Glenn Dennis, who's a mortician, that's how I got involved in Roswell. Because I started researching it, investigating, and then I would go to the museum where Glenn Dennis and Walter Hart, the original guys.
Yeah.
And then they got to know me over the years, and finally Glenn Dennis gave me the GPS coordinates to the BLM marker right near the debris site. So that's how I found it. I didn't find it.
PVC pipe?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, it's all metal.
Okay.
It's a metal pipe with a metal emblem on the top. This is BLM. I mean, we're talking 40s stuff.
Right.
And when he was talking about his nurse friend that was in the autopsy room, one thing she had told him that they didn't have internal organs like ours. From what she could see, she didn't recognize. Not that they don't. It's just that she didn't see him and she didn't recognize him. Maybe she didn't see it all. So that kind of falls into the place. Well, how do I eat? How do they eat, or
do they even need
and then,
to?
so when you hear the stories of Dulcie with them soaking in vats of blood, and then you hear about the cattle, and the one dominating factor is the blood, and you think, okay, but then we were using blood for in vitro fertilization. They could be using blood for hybrids. Yeah.
Still, as creepy and terrifying as that is, I mean, that sounds logical to me on the surface. That's pretty wild. They perfected the process so much that there's not a drop spilled.
Well, I mean, it's technology, right? I mean, we're getting that way. Remember the Star Trek movies when was it Chekhov, fell and hit his head off of the Enterprise, right? And then Dr. McCoy comes in and goes, "Oh my God, they're drilling in his head. So medieval, to release the pressure."
Yeah.
And that's exactly what it is. I mean, they still drill in people's heads, but eventually you won't have to. We'll figure that out. But it's just technology, and it's just because we don't understand it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just means we don't understand it.
Yeah,
because we're not there yet. I still can't understand how a cell phone works, and I designed the chips for them, and I can't.
It's pretty incredible technology, especially when you consider how far it's come along just in 20 years. What cell phones used to look like 25 years ago versus what it is now. We're basically cyborgs. Our computer pieces are just not attached yet.
Well, yeah, but basically we are transistors. The human body is a transistor. Basically, it's a capacitor, and our nerves work off impulses, and we give off, like I said, I don't know how many volts, and we can store 70,000 volts in our body just by rubbing our feet on the carpet and shocking our, our little sister or our little brother or whatever.
My dad used to be really good at that.
70,000 volts from that shock, yeah. Not amperage, not current, but volts. But, it was interesting because, we were in Florida this last week. My wife and I, we flew back late on Sunday with Universal Studios and stuff,
Oh, yeah.
But so we're flying back, and I'm sitting in the airplane, and we're going 400 miles an hour, 30,000 feet. And I'm going, technology, that is so scary. And then, so what happened? We get back. Did you read what happened yesterday? What was the Alaskan air pilot?
Oh yeah, he tried to turn on the emergency fire suppression system, right? Which would have killed the engines.
Yeah, which is shuts down the fuel to the engines.
Yeah, that's wild.
There are
Thank God they stopped
on board,
it.
you would have killed them all.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I got thinking, and there's a joke about that too, because not about that, but about comedian says, I'm not worried about my time to go. I'm worried about the pilot's time to go.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because and then we still had that one aircraft where it was a couple hundred people went missing. They seem to think the pilot committed suicide.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And they still haven't found. They still haven't found.
Sucks so bad. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but technology. I mean, now they're talking about AI and how that's going to f up everything out there, and it's already starting to f up things. Pretty much for us too.
Especially with news.
Yeah, especially. Yeah, depending on who you listen to, but
for sure.
Yeah, it kind of messes things up also. But it's also funny too, because I'm not going to go into it, but AI kind of tells it the way it is, with no emotions.
It's true.
And that's and it's affecting a lot of people. What do you mean? Wait, AI don't care. Nope. AI just, this is what it is. And that's why, as a former cop, with these places like Minnesota and Portland and Seattle are defunding their police, I'm going, good. See what happens. Because you're going to defund your police and crime's going to go up. Guess what's happening now? Crime's gone up on all those places. They're starting to change the tune there. But then again, too, I'm just waiting for that one city to delete all their police force and then hire a private security, like we had during Saddam period, right? And anyway, Blackwater, right?
Right.
So let's hire Blackwater. Well, Blackwater answers to their CEO. They don't answer to the mayor. Yeah. They don't answer to the governor, and they're going to just kick your butt right there on the street. They don't care, And you can say, "Well,
we talked about this before."
Yeah, we're Sean.
Like large military, private militaries, where like Amazon is attacking Google with their like military or whatever.
Yeah, sabotage.
They're doing it software wise. Yeah, they're actually doing it that way. They're attacking each other via using their software. It's going to be interesting if Musk gets involved, because I think they're all going to lose when Musk gets involved.
Yeah,
he's a pretty smart guy, kind of stupid when it comes to personality, but
yeah.
But
I think he's on the spectrum.
I've been watching, but we see it happen right now. With the cities, and then and even I read a report a while ago about how easy AI is to be able to hack.
Right.
Once it figures it out, then it'll just accelerate that. If it decides to go off on its own, and
sure,
I know what it can achieve other than this self-awareness or something.
I think it's funny when you have those like captchas that say like, oh, press the find the stoplights. It's like, okay, this is a robot determining if I'm a human, to make sure I'm not a robot. So it's like a robot checking a robot. Like
you're teaching it to recognize what that stop sign looks like, or what a bicycle looks like, or whatever. Yeah,
exactly.
Yep.
And it makes me wonder what the aliens think. I mean, some people seem to think the Greys are just like they're little worker bees, and they just do whatever they're told. I don't think that's true. I think, based on what Travis Walton said, it seems like they have a mind of their own and maybe their own personalities and stuff. So they're not as, they're not as worker bee as we think they are. But I always, wonder what they perceive us at. And I wrote a blog about that one time years ago called, to think like an alien, you have to be an alien. You really can't think like an alien. And people, because they always ask me, well, why don't they just land on the White House lawn? And why don't they just do that? Why don't they do? I'm going, I'm not an alien. I can't tell you.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how an alien thinks. They have their own agenda. They're doing their own thing. If you happen to be flying by in a fighter jet while they're going, they might screw with you a bit to see what you can do, see what the technology is. Maybe have some fun. Maybe they have some humor. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe they're laughing. Hey, did you see that guy trying to spiral down to get me and I just blew him off?
Right.
Right. Or something like that. I mean, we don't know. It would be kind of funny if they turned out to be like Paul from the movie Paul.
Yeah.
Where they just had that whole personality and they just
That'd be wild. Yeah.
Generations and generations.
It was a giant interactive zoo that they just get admission to.
But we are a very, very, very unique planet, which we have to really consider, because 70% of the Earth's surface is covered with water. Well, now it turns out that there's more water underground than there is on the surface. Okay, so what does that mean now? Does that mean that there's really only 20% of the Earth is Earth? I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to figure out, give me the exact numbers and tell me, the continents are all floating.
Mm-hmm.
They're not like, solid all over the ground. That's why we have continental drifts and earthquakes and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
People don't realize that they're floating out there. But that just came out in the news last couple of months that they found. It's called, I don't know, like a sponge type of soil or something, but it's a lot of water, and they're estimating that there's more water underground now than we have in all the oceans on water on the Earth.
That's crazy.
So we're going, okay, which makes sense. Goes back to that hydrogen theory that you don't even need to be in the water. We go underground and get as much water as you want if your fuel is hydrogen.
Mm-hmm.
Easy to get. So it goes back to my theory. One more notch for me.
Right. If I could ask you one more question before we got to get off here,
Sure.
What would you say is probably the most baffling case that you've ever investigated?
Baffling case. Well, I guess.
Or maybe the most like intense, maybe something that scared you, if anything has.
Well, I mean, the first chapter of the 37th parallel was pretty scary.
It is.
Ben really couldn't. I read it and it was scarier than that.
Mm-hmm.
Because we were out in the middle of nowhere, and we were vulnerable, and something was going on.
That would be
but
pretty
then
scary.
Again, too, then we had the case, 2016 July 3rd, where this guy's watching us. That could be part of whatever, So I mean, I don't think, to be honest, the scariest investigation really wasn't anything paranormal so far. What it was I was out in the I can't remember exactly, Branza something desert in California before I moved out here, and I was doing an investigation out there, and it was pitch black, and you can't really carry guns in California, but I was pitch black out there, and I'm walking around, and I'm in one area, and I'm just checking out the area and looking at the stars, and supposedly where there had been UFO sightings, and I kind of heard something, and I turned on my flashlight, and I was surrounded by a pack of coyotes.
Oh, yes.
And they came right up on me. I never heard them.
I remember
this. I heard a little bit, but then I realized it wasn't just 4 or 5. It was a shitload, and they surrounded me.
Jeez.
And that scared the shit out of me, because I go, okay, this is not a paranormal. This is a real danger here. And I had one of those 4-cell flashlights, the big heavy ones.
And you did the right thing, charging them and all that.
Oh, you heard about it?
It's in the book.
Oh, it's in the book. I forget. Okay, so yeah. Well, that scared the hell out of me. I forget what.
No, it's okay.
But it's because I just started yelling and screaming and headed towards my vehicle, running towards it, and it was a little ways away. But I always remember that, and because of that, I won't go anywhere now without.
I don't blame you.
Without a good flashlight and something to back it up.
Just the other day for me, where I live, they just harvested all the corn, and I go run almost every day, and I run by this field, and I'm just running, and there's all this like vegetation they planted along like the sidewalk, and maybe 10 feet in front of me as I'm just jogging, I see a coyote just like jog out from the vegetation back in, like heading back toward the cornfield. And I was like, holy shit, and just immediately cut and cross the street, because I'm like, I don't know, coyotes could be rabid, who knows what he could think. But yeah, that was that freaked me out. He didn't do anything. I probably scared him, and he just went off the other direction, was probably in the freshly harvested field looking for mice, or whatever, something. But yeah, that's the first time I'd seen like a coyote like that up close in the wild, like, without a barrier between me and him. You know what I mean? And
he's probably like, man, this human just ran up on me. I don't know if this human.
Exactly. I seemed like I scared him, because he kind of like ducked his head down and like trotted off pretty quickly off into the field. You know what I mean? Maybe he was napping under the bush or something. Who knows? But yeah,
you learn. You learn as you get older. If I knew then what I know now, living out in Colorado, when I was in California, we were in Yosemite. Me and my 2 sons, when they were small. My wife's carrying my daughter, and we're going through these trails in Yosemite, and we come up a trail, and just not too far away was a mama bear and 2 cubs. And I stood there with my boys going, look at that. Isn't that cute? Mama bear and two cubs. My wife was gone.
Yeah.
She was gone. She took off running,
Yeah.
And I look back at that going, what an idiot I was.
Well, it's like those people you see them at like Glacier National Park or wherever, and they walk up to those bison and they try and take a selfie with them. And it's like, that thing would run you over without thinking twice about it. And they have.
Yeah.
They have.
It happens all the time. Yeah. Well, you have to think about the same thing with aliens, too. I mean, if you actually see, I can tell you right now, I know what I think I'm going to do if I ever see an alien. And I think I know how I'm going to act. But you never know until that exact moment.
Okay.
I have a good friend, Joe Fix, who was a Bigfoot investigator. And years ago, he tried to get me to go to Tennessee in the Appalachians. He was investigating a Bigfoot sighting up there. A lady lived in a cabin where Bigfoot had been visiting her dad and family for years. And so she had enough evidence and she could bring them out. Anyway, we're going to go. Well, at the time I was contracting for, I forget who it was, and I couldn't leave. Might have been Intel, but so he went by himself. Well, and with another kid. Anyway, he faced what he investigated. He was on a trail, and sure enough, one walked right up to him behind a brush, but above him, and he could see him, and he just kind of stared down at him. Just kind of looking at him.
Jeez.
But it wasn't like he was mean. He was kind of just looking at him.
Yeah.
And then he kind of got this feeling that he could almost hear a conversation, but not. Like maybe there might be something going on. But that's it. It wiped him out. For 4 years after that, he was off the lecture, circuit. I had to bail him out of jail once. We had to pay his rent, his car. I mean, it totally screwed him up, messed him up. He's better now. It's been a few years now.
Chasing him forever. When he finally came face to face, it just blew his mind.
And that's always a thought, for me as an investigator. I know, this is what I'm going to do. Say, hey, how you doing? Give him the old Spock thing, right? And or whatever, or give him the Paul one. But but you go, this is what I'm going to do. But you have no idea. I could run away like I'm 3 years old screaming with my hair on fire. I don't know.
Yeah.
But you never know. But I look back at that bear incident. I'm going, that was the wrong thing to do. Was just stand there. And going, especially with two little kids. The best thing to do is just, my wife did. She got out of there.
Leave
got
the
to
area.
the same place. Yeah, she claimed it was because she had peanut butter and jelly, sandwiches in a backpack.
I mean,
I give her more.
It's pretty scary whether because you could be the food. They don't need that PBJ,
No, and that's the other thing too. We hear stories about, Bigfoot being carnivore or being not carnivores, but they are carnivore. Yeah, well, they are an omnivore because there have been sightings of them carrying off dead deer, and so they appear to be omnivores. But I was thinking more like omnivores for humans, coming after humans. Now, I'm sure you guys have been doing this for a bit. I don't know if you talked to anybody about the amount of missing people every year in the U.S.
We've had an episode on you talking like missing 411, David Paulides.
And it's of course a lot of them have to do with runaways. A lot of them have to do with people just wandering off. But a lot of them go missing.
Very unexplained. Yeah.
And very unexplained.
Yeah, you'll find remnants of their existence in places that have already been searched and things that don't make sense, unopened or uneaten lunches and shoes and hats, just all kinds of weird things that don't make any sense. Somebody's backpack laid up against the tree. Yeah. And there's one that in the crazy mountains in Montana where that person, they found his belongings within eyeshot of a house. And it's like, if you're really lost out in the woods, in the mountains of Montana, and you find a house, it doesn't matter whose it is, you're going to go towards that house. And they found his, I want to say it was a backpack, and there was a cup, like a camping cup, and maybe a rain jacket. I'd have to look the story up again, but it was all within eye shot of this house. And,
I know what that is.
Yeah.
That's Bigfoot doing that.
Yeah.
And the reason why, because that's happened out here a couple of times.
Oh.
Matter of fact, we were going to do an investigation last year where a guy had his ATV out in the woods north of Denver, above I-70. and they have a cabin out there, and he was messing around on his ATV away from the cabin, and pretty far away from the cabin, and he hit a log, flipped over, and got knocked out and broke his ankle and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then he got up and he was limping a little bit, and then he passed out. Well, he woke up at the doorstep of someone's house. Something had placed him, and it wasn't his; it was a neighboring house. But it was the closest house to where he was,
Mm-hmm.
and something had picked him up and carried him over, and then put him in front of the door.
Mm-hmm.
And then he woke up and he had cell coverage.
Yeah.
So the people weren't home, unfortunately, but whoever did it, and they've had some Bigfoot sightings out there in the past.
Mm-hmm.
So he's thinking that that Bigfoot had picked him up, and maybe Bigfoot had grabbed the belongings and put it close to a house so people could see the belongings of the guy. I mean, that's another story we've heard out here too.
Yeah, that's kind of one of my running theories too. With it's smart enough to know that all these people in a sweeping search pattern are looking for something, and if you're that creature that took that person, you wait for the people to vacate the area they were just in, and then you leave the belongings behind, maybe because you don't understand exactly what's going on, but you're doing that. And there's also some other ones where they don't really work out very well for the people. They find their body parts up in trees and stuff like that. And yeah.
I mean, I was doing a Bigfoot investigation in Bailey, and I had a search and rescue tracker up there in Bailey helping me. Mm-hmm. And he was telling me one of the stories when they were out there just doing search and rescue practice, mm-hmm. that they came across a tent, mm-hmm. and a tent, the front door of the tent, everything was fine, and the igloo was there, and all the utensils and everything, whatever. Nothing touched the front of the tent. And as they went around the back, the people inside the tent had taken a knife and cut a back door on the tent and blew out of the back of the
Jeez.
tent. And he goes, I don't know what happened, but they made their own back door. Could have been somebody from Denver, and they never found any bodies or anything. But
they cut their way out.
They cut their way out of the tent.
Wow.
And then my wife told me there was a person that was working with them that they went out elk hunting out there by San Luis Obispo. Well, not mm-hmm. Obispo, San Luis Valley in the mountains. And they were elk hunting, and they were in a tent. And it's just like Terminator. It was the 3 red dots that were kind of moving, and they saw it inside their tent. So it came through a screen in the tent. Yeah, it was like a predator, exactly. And that's what they were saying. Both these guys had guns big enough to take down an elk. Mm-hmm. But that scared the shit out of them.
Jeez.
And they hunkered down with their guns loaded in that tent, and they blew out the next morning. They broke camp and left.
Yeah, jeez.
That scared them. Yeah, that scared them. Now, maybe someone was just screwing with them, but they're in the middle of nowhere. But
right.
You never
Can't
know.
Be too,
people too.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah. I think that's almost just as scary. So, well, Chuck, thank you so much for coming on with this. Honestly, for me, I've wanted to talk to you for a long time. So this means a lot, and I appreciate you coming on. It was amazing to talk to you and listen to you. I could do this for a couple hours just listening to you tell me stories, honestly. But again, thank you so much for coming on with us. And if you wouldn't mind, just tell everybody where they can find you. That way, people can look you up and see what else you guys got going on out there.
Yeah, well, I won't give you my address. But
no. Oh, okay.
Darn.
Actually, somebody found me on one of the TV shows I was on. They used Google Maps, and they found just from one screenshot of the front of the house. Jeez. Yeah, so I had a stalker there for a little bit.
Well, I promise not to stalk you.
No, it was okay. She was a nice nice person. He just told me how easy it is and how smart people are. So basically, it's UFOnut.com, not UFOnet, UFOnut, like a nut.com, and you can find that anywhere. It's easier than trying to look up Chuck Zukowski, because you'll never remember Zukowski. So just remember that UFO nut guy, was on the show the other day, and you'll find me.
Gotcha.
And then once you get to my website, the top of the website, it says email me. It goes right directly to me. And then, then I'll just answer your emails.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not really funded to go across the U.S. to do any investigations, but I can help you as much as I can.
Absolutely. Well, I've been on your website. There's a lot of really cool stuff. I haven't been all the way through your website, but everything, all your links to YouTube's and all that stuff is on there. So if anybody has an interest listening, definitely go check out Chuck's website, and just you can find random stuff about you on YouTube and Reddit forums and stuff like that.
It's all
Anyway,
free
so,
too. I don't charge. There's no advertisements on my website. I know YouTube probably throws an advertisement in just to make money.
They do that.
Some of the stuff, but I don't charge anything, And like I said, any evidence I find, I put it out there. It's for the reader to make your own assumptions. I give you exactly what I found. Elements from the metal, evidence I found from atom mutilations and stuff, and you kind of determine for yourself, what do you think, is this happening? You don't have to take my word for it, because I don't know everything either. I learn every time I do an investigation. I learn something new.
Yeah.
But thank you guys. I really appreciate it. I like podcasts like this where you can just talk about everything. It's nice.
Me too. Like I said, I would totally have you on for a part 2 and just listen to you tell me more stuff, because this is infinitely interesting to me. So
35 years, there's a lot of shit going on in my head. So sorry about that.
Dopey. It was awesome. Thank you. Well, guys, thank you again for listening. And if you find value in what we do, please go check us out on YouTube, Spotify, Google, or Apple Podcasts. Give us a like, subscribe, drop by and say hi on Instagram or Facebook. And you guys have a good night.
Thank you. Good night, guys.
What's going on, Fire fans? I Came With Fire podcast is sponsored by Red Clover Coffee and Sheep's Clothing LLC. Red Clover Coffee is a veteran-owned company with small batch roasted coffees, and they just happen to donate to some pretty awesome charities. Whether you're into specialty flavored coffees, single source coffees, or having a really cool coffee mug and some badass slaps, Red Clover has you covered. You can order ground, whole bean, or even coffee pods and get it all at 10% off your entire purchase using coupon code CAMEWITHFIRE. Again, that's 10% off your entire purchase using our coupon code CAMEWITHFIRE. I personally love their Blueberry Invasion and African Roast. That Blueberry Invasion hits the spot. Head over and get yourself some awesome coffee and support us by supporting our sponsor. I Came With Fire podcast is also sponsored by Sheep's Clothing LLC. Sheep's Clothing LLC is a unifying banner for all violent arts, disciplines, professions, and survivors of violent circumstances. Redefine violence. Both Zach and I being survivors of violent circumstances and LEOs in the military, we are especially excited to be able to offer you 10% off your entire purchase with coupon code FIRE10 at checkout. Whether you're looking for an awesome t-shirt, hats, slaps, flags, or MMA gear, they've got you covered. Me personally, I love my snapback with the leather patch surrounded by God's flannel. If you know, you know. That's coupon code FIRE10, FIRE10 at checkout for 10% off your entire purchase. Thank you all so much for supporting this podcast, and if you should feel compelled, treat yourself by supporting our sponsors as well. They truly make a difference for us. Now let's make a difference for them. See you on the next show.